Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. And welcome aboard to Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob. I am your Sensei Al Bob, your griot, and don't believe a word I say. I'm only telling you a story. Just a story, right? And back in the 80s, I belonged to a lot of different mystery schools. And one of them was the Course in Miracles, right? And this is lesson 110. We rule, let's see, what is the lesson? I am as God created me, right? All else is an illusion. Everything else, other than love's co-creation, is an illusion. You don't exist, right? All of this going on right now is an illusion, right? And so we have lots of different points of view. And that's okay, you know. What important is what you make of those points of view, right? So let's see.
Something went wrong. Try again in a few seconds.
Try again in a few seconds. You know, that means that that voice is listening to me 24/7, right? And that's why guys like Tony here, Tony, you know, he is so
and to him was given the key of
he's so restricted by
crazy stuff about the bottomless pit. This stuff will make the hair on your arm stand up. I am not joking.
It looks like a terrible, unbelievable plague of demons from hell is going to be unleashed on this earth like the world has never seen.
Well, we've seen them.
It's really
FDR, Harry Truman, Ike,
verse 1.
JFK.
And the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit like the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. And it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass of the earth, nor any green thing, neither any tree, but only those men who have not the seal of God in their foreheads. And to them it was given that they should not kill them, but that they should be tormented 5 months. And their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when he striketh a man. And in those days shall men seek death, and shall not find it, and shall desire to die, and death shall flee them. And the shapes of the locusts were like horses prepared unto battle. And
So we've heard this before, right? Yep.
Crowns like gold. And
crowns like gold. Yep. And
at the border at the same time. And that is where the Great Pyramid of Giza now stands. The reference would seem to place the altar and the monument in different places, on the border and in the middle of the land. So how do we come to the conclusion that the Great Pyramid is the fulfillment of that prophecy? As it turns out, the Great Pyramid of Giza,
and if you just pay $19.95, you'll find out. Right? So that has been pretty much the story, forever. Pay us money and we'll tell you what's going on, like these guys right here. Right? These guys are fun.
Open. Remember having that feeling for the first time? The first
day you opened, the first day you had a customer, the first day you taught a class, had a client, a patient, a session. Open. Remember the night before you opened. Who could ever sleep? Open. But there's a different question we are being asked now. Are you going to remain open even when your doors are closed? Open. That's how we show who we are. And there's another way to be open, to pull together or push, depending on the door. And we are making it work. And we will continue to make it work together. Because open.
And that's a great sentiment.
We are now accepting Bitcoin, Litecoin, and Ethereum. Don't forget to visit the Veritas store for focused life force energy, MMS, CBD pure hemp oil, Divina water, pure organic sulfur, flash drives with all our Sanitas and Veritas seasons, and other great products. And if you want to get in touch with Mel, want to be a guest on this radio program, have a guest suggestion, or have feedback, just click on the contact button of our website at veritasradio.com. And if you're listening on YouTube, like, subscribe, and share it. And click the bell to be notified when new interviews are available. And now, here's your host, Mel Fabricus.
Today's special guest is Celeste Solum, who has worked as a contractor for Homeland Security and FEMA. Her training and activations include the infamous day of 9/11, flood and earthquake operations, mass casualty exercises, and numerous other operations. Celeste is the author of 2 books, Electromagnetic Radiation Protection Solutions and 7 Thunders Revealed. Celeste grew up in a military and governmental home, with her father working for the Naval Warfare Center, and later as Assistant Director for Public Lands and Natural Resources in both Washington State and California. Celeste also has training and expertise in small agricultural lobbying, integrative and functional medicine, asymmetrical and symmetrical warfare, and organic farming. Celeste joins us directly from Condon, Montana, and her websites are shepherdshearts.life and patreon.com/shepherdsheartfarm. They are both linked on our website. Hello, Celeste, and welcome to Veritas. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today. Celeste, a lot of fluid information out there every single day. Things change. A lot of people wondering who's telling the truth. But one thing that I'm getting in the last few days, the past week, is this situation with FEMA and the fact that the president supposedly has delegated all the power to FEMA. Sounds like science fiction to me, but there's a law being quoted here. You are an expert. First of all, before you tell me about this, give us a little bit of your background. You worked for almost 20 years for FEMA. Tell me a little bit more about yourself, and then we'll dive right in.
Okay, so do you want me to tell you about what I did at FEMA?
Well, go to Veritas and watch that, okay. Right?
So basically, back in the day before 9/11, you just kind of did a little bit of everything. And whatever disaster came up, everybody kind of pitched in their talents, and we brainstormed and we would find solutions. And then things began to change the closer that you got to 9/11. And then it got very militarized, very structured, very compartmentalized. And you knew that things were happening and something was about ready to happen. And we didn't know exactly.
Didn't know what was going to happen. But Cliff Hyde of Conscious Thinking, he knows, right?
Means that he fundamentally would have HIV if that virus has. Okay, here we go. Test. Yep, we've got it. Okay, so today is April 19th. It's 8:23 a.m. This is the third attempt to get this subject through censorship. I had 2 interviews that didn't pass a YouTube algorithm and didn't get put up on YouTube. So I'm going to try it again this way. And so the subject today is that it's an op And as many people are now starting to recognize, and I'm calling these people my black checkmark people because they recognize that we've got a bioweapon. And so so my black, yeah, I've got new ones, hang on. There we go. So my black checkmark people are like George Webb, Paul Cottrell, Stefan Molyneux.
Go check out these people's websites.
Anybody, basically. There's, Iran, big chunks of China, big chunks of Russia, and all these people that understand we're dealing with a bioweapon. And we now have some understanding that we need to pass on, some things we need to consider, and then we'll jump into the bioweapon economy, which is going to occupy us for a number of years. So the first thing is, it was an op. It was deliberately released. If you go and look at George Webb, if you go and follow his work, if you look at a number of these other individuals that are tracking the links between Fauci and HIV patents and these HIV inclusions in the COVID, which we've known since December, and were repeatedly denied and forced to be taken off the internet by the Chinese Communist Party. But we've got really pretty certain proof that that's the case, and that these HIV inclusions are in there. It's not natural, it's engineered, therefore it's a bioweapon, and Fauci is in it up to his neck.
He owns the patents.
Because he has all these patents that relate to the specific proteins involved, et cetera, the variants and that are we see included in the COVID coronavirus. Anyway, so basically what it comes down to is it's airborne HIV.
Isn't that delightful?
Airborne AIDS. And so we have a very interesting situation where people fail to grasp what's going on. And so they'll come out with statistics that are intended to provide reassurance, I guess, at a personal ego level, as well as pass that reassurance on and come off as authority on it, as opposed to somebody who's questioning and skeptical but pursuing wherever the evidence goes, right? Anyway, so it's airborne HIV, and because it has that HIV inclusion in it, it means that there is no such thing as an asymptomatic infection. So that idea that 85%, well, like this guy in the woo-woo world, David Wilcox, said, he got it. He's not worried. He's in his 40s. And he felt extra sleepy for a month. And that was what he thought he had it. He'd never been tested, as far as I understand. So, and so in that sense, his symptom was that he was extra tired. Well, that's part of the HIV issue in terms of how it attacks people. The debilitating lack of energy, the inability of the mitochondria to generate the appropriate responses, extra oxygen pollution, extra radical, free radicals, et cetera, et cetera. And because it's airborne, it now means that we're just transmissible breathing it, right? But anyway, so there's no such thing as an asymptomatic case. And that's because the HIV is going to be symptomatic even if you're not aware of it. Your overall system degradation will
so
be
you get the
such
picture.
that alone.
So go to Cliff Hyde's channel, Critical Thinking, right? So do you believe any of that? Really, what I see is that all of that has a certain element of truth. What is the big picture? What is the real story? The real story is that everything is an illusion except for love's co-creation, right? That's it, right? And all that we are experiencing is manifested because it's like the hill where the school is, where John Boy, the canary in the coal mine, purchased from me, but all he really purchased was to be the tax. I never owned that hill. That hill was the Cherokee's most sacred spot, right? It was the physical representation of love's co-creation. So whatever you wanted, you got, So Inga and George found it, bought it, 300 acres. They wanted, they had experienced most of their life war. They were stuck. Inga was from Norway or Scandinavia or someplace, and George from Russia. They met, at the Sorbonne. They're artists. They had a really great time, and then World War II broke out, right? And George's grandfather was this super duper Bolshevik, and Joe Stalin was trying to kill him all the time. Inga's first experience with her new family when she went to see them, she's living with them. She's having a nice time. They're living in a nice little house. And then in Germany, I think. And, one of the Bolshevik guys sent George's, father a bomb, and George's mom opens it up, right? And the whole house blows up. Boom, right? Now that was, George's father was out doing something, but the mom got blown to pieces. And when, Inga was taking a shower at the time, the house blows up and the whole house collapses on top of them. And Inga's naked and, she's all wet and all this plaster dust is, stuck to her. And she's getting up and she puts her hand on her mother-in-law's head. No body, just a head, right? And, from that point on, that was like year zero for them. It was just, one catastrophe, one Holocaust, one unbelievably terrible day, one day at a time. And it was like, what? Now, she came from a relatively well-to-do family. Her father owned a factory. She was like a princess. She had horses. She had everything she wanted. She went to all these great schools. She was a really good artist. She was actually somewhat famous before she met George because she loved birds and she could paint paintings of them. And she produced a book of all the birds in Europe. And this was before photography could capture speed. And, her paintings of birds were far superior than any photograph. So up to the day she's died, and I think still to this day, her estate gets money from those paintings. So, she was rolling in clover. She meets George, and that's it. And, so she wanted a little fun, little some more challenge other than being, a young girl who could have it whatever she wanted, and without having, she had class, she was of a certain class, but she didn't have to be within the ruling class, So, she was, what was Marx called the bourgeois, right? That was her dad. Anyway, so from that point on, her life was just a Holocaust, right? She saw more unbelievable, and it's been that way since Babylon, or since the fall of the Tower of Babel, because up until then humanity was pretty close to being that character that represented love's co-creation, meaning they lived hundreds of years, thousands of years. They were in fine health all the time until they ascended, right? And they were telepathic, and they could basically think of whatever they wanted, and bingo, there it is. Now, that still exists. People can live as long as they want to, but most people give up the ghost relatively early, right? Around here, with all the Appalachian poverty, people's diet is ridiculously bad. I mean, it used to be great. Everyone used to have their own garden. Everyone used to be living to be 90. And now they, lucky if they make it to 58. And all the Mamos around here who were the elders all died in the last 10 years, all of them. And the oldest one was 62, and I was sprier than they were, before they died, the last 10 years or the last 15 years. So, that's, where we're at. And the hill, basically, so Inga and George found that hill because they were looking for a place to rest for the rest of their life where things wouldn't blow up and tanks wouldn't show up on their front door. And George, and they finally made it to America because after the war, they couldn't come here. Hey, Graham. And so they had to go to, Argentina, of all places, and they met all the old Nazis. It's like, hey, good George, oh, hey, how you doing? But after 2 or 3 years, they finally got a visa to come and emigrate to America, and they did. And they came to New York, and they did paintings of rich people's dogs. And what's up? I'm talking about the Course in Miracles, and the lesson today is I am as God created me, right? Them old Nazis, yes, and they're still around, They don't seem to die, Henry Kissinger, Brzezinski, Jimmy Carter, Jimmy Carter a Nazi? No. Anybody who held that job, they were either mind controlled or, a low grade Nazi, but all of that doesn't matter. So I had a little, stuff earlier on, I love, so people send me, little thingamajigs, links to go look at stuff, and I do, and I ran a few before, right? And I still have some more left. Let's see. Oh, here's a good one. Yeah.
And it looks like it's starting to come unraveled. Check this out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and please subscribe to our channel. Well, it's a beautiful Tuesday here in Portland. I hope today is going well for you. And
that was last Tuesday.
You have a chance to get out and breathe some fresh air and walk around. I should have brought the mask upstairs. I'll get it tomorrow and I'll show you. Or maybe during one of the breaks. A friend of Sean's is making masks.
Now this guy, his name is, what is his name? His name is Tom.
America is
Tom Hartman.
Fashion
right? And he has a pretty interesting show.
You see pictures of people in Asia where
he's on the same level as
everybody's wearing
CNN,
the same
MSNBC,
here you've got masks,
but he's more like Jimmy Dore, but not as
all different kinds of colors,
but he has good points of view.
Step,
right, step by step.
Donald Trump last night had a complete meltdown on TV. If it wasn't, and God bless Paula Reed over at ABC News, at CBS News for holding his feet to the fire. It was pretty remarkable what she did. I mean, she literally was interrupting him to point out the fact that he was lying. And she kept saying, all of February, what'd you do? Nothing. Well, he went golfing several times. He held several rallies. He was on Fox News a bunch of times telling people that there's nothing to worry about and everything's going to be good. So that's, basically what he did in February. Now, the Trump administration has published a timeline of things that the CDC did in February or some.
No, Tom isn't on RT. He's on
February
Truth Network.
Trump. Oh, my God. And, I didn't watch the meltdown because I don't watch the Trump reality TV show anymore. I mean, this is really what it is. Trump is saying, I've got a big decision to make. When to open the country. Well, he never closed the country, right? It's up to the governors to do that. And individual mayors and county officials, they can order shutdowns. There's plenty of state quarantine laws that go back to yellow fever epidemics in the 1800s. that empower them to do those things. Tuberculosis, polio. I mean, there's been a bunch of diseases that we've had to deal with and that we have actually enshrined in law. Not so much the disease, but the power of local officials to shut down their areas, their municipalities, or their states. And there was in 1976 a law passed called the National Emergencies Act, which does
Jimmy Carter
somewhat increase federal power. This was, following on the backs of, I believe the case was Youngstown Steel. It was the name of the Supreme Court case back in the 1940s, late 40s.
Anyway, so
maybe even the early 50s. Frankly, I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly when it was.
We'll just skip up a little bit.
And in fact, I mean, well, let me just recap, and then I want to get to Trump's tweet this morning and what's going on with this. And by the way, for our program today in our first hour, basically my question, and I'll ask it right now, and then I'll give you the setup for it. Is this 40-year, and it's 40 years to the year right now. Started in 1980 with the election of Ronald Reagan. 40 years later is right now, more or less. I mean, we're just 6 months short of it, I think.
He's saying that Republicans had
maybe 7-8 months, whatever it is,
a plan to destroy America.
Is the 40-year Republican plan to destroy American government and give all power in this country to the oligarchs, to the billionaires? Is that plan disintegrating right in front of our eyes? That's our question for the first hour. Our second hour, how much damage can Donald Trump do to blue state governors? He is up to something. And I'm going to lay all this out in our second hour. And it looks to me like he's basically, he's got the federal government seizing ventilators and masks and PPE, personal protective equipment, PPE, going to states and to hospitals, literally seizing them and taking them to pass along to red state governors. I mean, this is getting weird. So that's our second hour. In our third hour, Dr. Bandy Lee is going to be with us. She is the psychiatrist from Yale who wrote a fascinating book about Donald Trump and company. It was called The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. 27 psychiatrists and mental health experts assess the president. So she'll be.
So I wanted to play something. The Koch brothers, right, are pretty much instrumental in everything going on here. And right, in the 50s and 60s, they became quite wealthy because their father made a crap load of money by doing what Rockefeller did. Rockefeller, took over the transportation of oil, right? And then he took over the oil companies one by one by forcing them out because he controlled the transportation of it through first railroad cars and then through pipelines. And then he owned all the oil companies, right? The Koch brothers did the same thing through controlling the distilling of oil, making gasoline and all the other products that oil makes. And that was the Koch brothers' daddy. And he was a pretty, not nice man, he was, if you ever watched the movie The Birth of a Nation, he said that was the greatest movie ever made. He was Woodrow Wilson's buddy. And they basically were instrumental in forcing Jim Crow on America. Because after the Civil War, Lincoln wanted to, bring everyone together and move forward, right? And that's why he was killed. And he had a guy named Johnson, just like Kennedy's vice president was a Johnson, who was a out and out racist MF mofo, and just like Kennedy's Johnson, same thing. That guy was a piece of work. Both of them were, right? And Johnson was the first guy to be impeached, right? But the Senate didn't impeach him. The Congress did. But so this play has been played over and over and over, and it's being played by the hidden hand, the powers that shouldn't be, all the rest, the usual suspects. And do you think people seal was not put on podium by mistake? No. Nothing is done by mistake. The presidential seal was taken off soon after he signed the national, we're in emergency, and that was the first time. I mean, Tomboy made a reference to it that little bit of presidential order, executive order, was done by Jimmy Carter in 96. 76. And that power was put there. And no one used it. Trump used it. And that's why the seal was gone, right? Then it came back. And why did it come back? Because FEMA, before it pulls the trigger, it has a period of time before he signs that thing and the military show up on the street. And if it doesn't happen, the clock goes back. So the seal came back to the podium. Not to say that he's already set it in motion, but certain aspects didn't click in. They can be, the circuit breaker can be pushed down again, and it can be brought forth again. But again, I'm talking to why that didn't happen. That didn't happen because I am as God created me. We are as God created us. And God did not create us to be slaves, to be property, And during the Piscean Age, that was a faux material illusion. But now we're in the Aquarian Age, and I mean, we are in it, We, in 1968 is when we started to step into the Aquarian Age, right? And that's Age of Aquarius, right? And we had, rock and roll, and we had, LSD, and flower children, and ban the bomb, and, get out of Vietnam, and, save the earth, and all of the above, right? And Tom reads this thing from Koch Bro, and it's pretty frigging amazing.
She'll be with us in our third hour. So back to my riff here about the 40-year Republican plan disintegrating. People are wondering why Donald Trump melted down at his press conference yesterday. And there's, in my opinion, really a simple explanation. The plan is falling apart. It's just that simple.
Wait till he reads the plan.
Falling apart. Back in 1980, when David Koch ran for president on the Libertarian ticket, this was kind of the beginning of the whole thing. Back in 1980, when David Koch ran on that ticket, and I'm going to read to you parts of his platform. This was David Koch's platform in 1980 when he ran for vice president of the United States on the Libertarian ticket. Got 1 million votes, by the way. We urge the repeal of all federal campaign finance laws. We favor the abolition of Medicare and Medicaid. We favor the repeal of the fraudulent, bankrupt, and increasingly oppressive Social Security system. We propose the abolition of the governmental postal service. We oppose all personal and corporate income tax. We support the eventual repeal of all taxation. All criminal and civil sanctions against tax evasion should be terminated immediately.
This is the Koch brothers.
We support repeal of minimum wage laws. We
guys
advocate the complete separation of education and state. Government ownership, operation, regulation, and subsidy of schools and colleges should be ended. We condemn compulsory education and call for the immediate repeal. We support the abolition of the Environmental Protection Agency. We support abolition of the Department of Energy and the Department of Transportation. We demand a return of America's rail system to private ownership. We advocate the abolition of the Federal Aviation Administration and the Food and Drug Administration. I mean, it just goes on and on, right? This is David Koch's agenda. and it has become the Republican agenda. It was put into place when Ronald Reagan became president in 1980, in the election in 1980.
Yep. And it has been there since George frigging Washington. The only reason that those minuscule little things of the social safety net ever came in was because they were pressure relief valves. Because when things got so bad, people would revolt. And we got Social Security and all of that, which he said by FDR, the New Deal wasn't a New Deal. It was a pressure release valve. Someone said, oh, you saved America. No, he said, I saved capitalism, right? And we don't have a capitalist state. We have a socialist state. But it is a socialist corporate state, which is fascism. That is, if you look that term up, it's fascism, right? So Tom there, he's trying to do the right thing in a liberal sensibility. So he is, a nouveau liberal, right? And if you go listen to Chris Hedges, and he's on RT. Now, Tom isn't. He's on this thing called Truth and Freedom, network. And, I really have to say this, and Mr. Max Igon says this, I totally agree with what he says. And he is really getting quite philosophical now, right? Because he's been on, radio and his YouTube channel for, God, at least 10, 12, 15 years, maybe 20, right? But he has been, like David Icke and others, out in the hinterlands saying, hey, look at this, watch out for this. Now it's happening right in front of our eyes. And a guy like, not Ricky, not Jimmy, something from Boston. That guy, he's like the road warrior. He's driving all over America saying, look at this, look at this. Well, people have been saying, I've been saying this since 1969, and every time I would get a platform to speak, I've had 3 radio shows, and I got kicked off. I mean, when I was just being funny and telling stories, I was pretty popular. I had 2 radio shows in New York City, one in Long Island and one on WBAI. I mean, how could anyone get thrown off? But I can name to claim to fame. Steve Post and I both got fired from WBAI around the same time. And what I did was, there was a TV show on ABC where Hugh Hefner would reenact his grotto parties, right? And he'd have Tony Bennett there and this person and doing all the stuff that he would do in his Playboy clubs, right? Have those same entertainers then be on TV, and it was so cool. And the girls were in the bunny outfits, and other girls looked really hot, and that was that, right? So I did a similar thing, but what I did was I gave the political and power elite of New York City the opportunity to come in and say whatever the heck they want, right? The only thing was I did it in like a party scene. I mean, there was no TV. It was a radio show. And I would have a nice little table of nashi things, right? And the punch was like, rum, tequila, vodka, and, fresh pineapple and fresh fruit and really cold and very sweet. I had some nice liqueurs in there, but man, I had even some cachaça, which is like rocket fuel. So 1 cup of that, right, would, wow, be like having 6 shots of whiskey, right? And the other thing, my good friend, Coca Crystal, she was a great baker of edibles. And so she had all kinds of really tasty things there that she would, drop off to me. And they were cream-filled, yummy things. And I mean, just, oh, wow, I'll take another. Oh, that cookie is so, and by that time, you were off to the races. So I had a show for maybe, 8 weeks before it really got, people started coming and saying things they should never say live on the radio. Bingo, Al and Steve. Steve was before me, and I don't know whether I got thrown off. Like it's like you're guilty because of you're close by to somebody. I don't know who got really thrown off him because he was like doing a better version of Democracy Now. A real. I mean, I have to say she's that lady who does Democracy Now, especially when she went to the Indian country, where the pipeline was being just forced through their land and to destroy their water. And she was there, and no one knew about it. And the only reason America knew about it is that she went there and got arrested and beat up and all the above. But her show has just been, a more socialist version of Meadows on MSNBC. My opinion only. Remember, don't believe a word I say. I am just your storyteller telling you a story, right? So let's see what the gang has been saying. Let's see. Graham says, Tom Hartman, TV. So he's not on RT. He's on this Freedom Truth thing, right? And like I said, Max Igon says, forget truth, the truth community. What we need is the freedom community. We need a movement not towards truth. Truth is out there. It's right. That was like, X-Files. The truth is out there, meaning it's there. We don't have to find it. It's there. But we have to manifest. We don't have to manifest truth. We have to manifest freedom. That's what we have to manifest. Because guys like again, there's this great book called Koch Land, right? And so the Kochs, since, Tom read you the manifesto of one of the brothers who ran for president on the libertarian ranks, right? The John Birch Society. And, but you should read the stuff he wrote before that. And he put together, all of the super duper, neoconservative motifs in the United States in the last 60 years came from those guys. They took all of that. They're like, got $60 billion to their name. They got more money than God. They can do what they started the whatchamacallit, the Tea Party. They started, the freedom guys in Congress. You name it, they started it, and they, all the think tanks, all the nonprofits, all the entities that have bought, all of the congressmen and senators and legislatures in the states and the governors, they did. And that's why we have a fascist, dictatorial, country. It's just, and why we're having this little event going down now is that these guys are hanging on by their fingernails because we're in, the land of, we're up to see the wizard, We're seeing the truth. We are realizing we need to have freedom. Let's see, Tom. Yep. What the haps? Do you think POTUS seal? Yeah, well, I told you about POTUS seal. Let's see. Well, then back power through individual freedom, right? By us being in every day and every way taking the piece of love's co-creation and making it stronger by everything we do when we go out, when we talk to people, when we see them, we be nice, always be good, always be nice, never give in, never give up to fear, anger, stupidity, the darkness, right? The darkness is there for a reason, to give us the power to step up, to overstand, not understand. You don't want to be understanding stuff, you're underneath the standing, we've been there for the last 20, we've been understanding for the last 26,000 years. It's time for us to overstand, let's see, and whoop, we jumped too far. Let's see. Kill the elite. No, we don't kill the elite. We have to be, Anthony Fauci, that guy's a piece of work because, he's a guy who slipped AIDS, like our good friend Cliff was telling us, that we now have airborne AIDS. Isn't that fun, And it's, any kind of mask you're talking about ain't going to stop it, right? And this is a control mechanism because everyone's going to need not just one shot, but every year it's going to be like AIDS. Those folks, look at Magic, he's had AIDS now, 20 years? He's doing great. He feels great, but he's a billionaire and can afford it, right? And there's going to be a low rent version of that, but it's not going to be fun. It's going to be called slavery, right? And they're just giving you the heads up of it. What it's hitting is the old people, black people, people with all the people that the insurance companies don't want to have health care, they're being killed. And they aren't being killed in vast numbers. I mean, the numbers that are being told to us are being, played with. But again, don't believe a thing I say. I don't know. I'm just looking at dots, right? And Cliff, I put Cliff on him talking about this, being, what it is. His information is valuable because it needs to be heard. Doesn't need to be believed. Just need to be heard, right? And Tomboy's information needs to be heard, not believed, And the guy talking about the demons and the empty pit needs to be heard. These guys all need to be heard. They don't need to be gotten rid of, clicked off, If you're saying something valuable on our live chat, I'm not going to kick you off. But if you're being, just a infantile child wanting attention, yeah, bingo, you're gone, And so you can say whatever you want in any way you want to say it, as long as it's an interesting and valuable point of view, talking about, pineapple parties and all of that, no, sorry, we don't have time for that. Did he want to go back to the 1880s? Oh, worse than that. He wanted to go back to the founding fathers. You're talking about the Koch brothers. He wanted to go back to, if you look at the frigging Constitution, it's just written for white, rich men, not women, not people of color, not slaves, not even worker white guys from Europe. They can't vote, They have no say. They can't own land, They can work. They can have a little job, but, if they have a job, they're renting that pub from the landlord, the rich guy. They're renting that barn to shoe horses from, the rich guy doesn't want to shoe horses, but he'll rent that facility out to the guy who knows how to do it really well. So the guy gets, makes a living, does pretty good, gets to, rent a comfortable house, gets to eat pretty well, has a couple of horses. He gets time to go fishing and, have an old lady and kids. And that was the American way. Be a slave, You have within your strata, your class strata, you can move up that ladder, but there's a little ceiling there. And women, man, they know it. They're still experiencing it, No matter how much they hey, wait a minute. We work twice as hard as the guys do in the office, and we only make 70%, 70 cents on their dollar. My sister, right? I'm 14 years old. I've been working for Grandpa Stoll and Mike, his son, now, since I was 9, right? By the time I was 10, they put me on the payroll. And even though I was never, I was going to school, I was never, we moved out to Long Island. They wanted me to be a master electrician. They wanted me to have a New York City license. Well, to have that, you have to have 16 years of consecutive W-2 forms, right? You need to have 4 years in the union. You need to have all these hoops you got to go through. And the only people who can do that are either really rich people who can buy that, or guys who have been electricians in their whole family. Great grandpa was an electrician, and he was, and so they were right there on that class line, right? And they still work, real. I mean, Grandpa Stahl worked to the day he died, but he loved what he did. So, but he had money. They, him and Mike had real estate all over New York City, but they had it. They got it when, different times when real estate was worthless, right? Right now, as the old term goes, when there's blood in the street, buy real estate. And that's what's going on, and it's going to get even worse because there are going to be spikes. When we start to see the spikes happen, that's what Cliff was saying. Hey, if you start seeing spikes, that is a bioweapon. Now, if the thing just kind of curves off and goes away like SARS did, but why is AIDS, in that RNA line? Why are these real obvious CRISPR marks? That RNA that they call, the Nuvo 19, has all of these precursors that kind of say, wait a minute, this didn't just occur from people eating bats or bat soup or walking through a funky neighborhood. No. And then there are all kinds of backstories about, yes, it's but, you have to realize that, and the guy who's running the World Health Organization, WHO, go look where he came from. I mean, he is as, suspect as Anthony is, and everyone involved in this. The lady who's got the scarf, who's, the administrator of the, the crew, all her daughters are in all of these big biotech companies, and they're at John Hopkins. They're all gatekeepers from this story. So this is, but, Tony's little story about how this is falling apart is true, because no matter what these morons think they can do, they cannot overcome the plan of love's co-creation. Sorry, not going to happen. And the more they try, it's like those guys in Detroit. Detroit, when we brought automobile manufacturing to Mexico and the rest of the third world, and put the supply chain coming, made China the factory of the world. That whole culture of Detroit that, had all these unioned workers who were making 67 grand a year, had health care, could send their kids to college, could buy a house, could do all of that. Didn't matter what color they were either. They could be black, they could be Hispanic, they could be anything. They could be women. And that was a leg up. And boy, the Kochs didn't like that. So they were all in on this new world order of being Mr. Global. The Kochs are the cousins to Mr. Global. Go read Catherine Austin Fitz. Go read Joseph P. Farrell. Go watch Dark Journalism, right? And he had a pretty good show last Friday. And so, again, don't believe any of these people. Just listen to them. Digest the information coming in and make up your own mind, because you need to be free. And the only way you can be free is you do it yourself, right? Let's see what you guys are saying here. Did he want to go back? Well, like I said, he wanted to go back to George Washington days, Went too far. Richie from Boston. That's the guy. Yes. You know. I go back to. I see. Yeah, Pompey. Let's see. Yep. Well, we had a Nazi Party of America, the American Bund, and we had, what's his name? Father Coughlin. Catholic Church was 100. He had like little swastikas on his little collar. I mean, you should go listen to that guy. And there were a number of senators and congressmen who were straight up. I mean, Henry Ford, Mr. The guy who flew across Lindbergh, even the Kennedys were somewhat enamored. And Adolf was a pretty good guy for the first 6 years until he burnt the Reichstag, right? He was, hiring everybody. He was doing exactly what FDR was doing, So, Richie from Boston. Yep. And so that guy's really passionate. But again, don't believe a word he says, but listen to him. Take in the information. Go look for yourself. Go check out the hospitals. Go see if there's a quarry near you full of Humvees and tanks, because, that's going to be administered by, the FEMA at the front of it, right? And then the thing that gives them the authority is COG, which is it's a thing that they put in during the Eisenhower period. That and before that, Mr. FDR and Harry Truman, both 33-degree Masons, basically made deals with aliens, and that's how we got the atomic bomb, right? And really, how we got the atomic bomb is the Nazis gave it to us because they had it. Because in 3 years, when they were up there in Russia fighting the Russians, they killed 60 million Russians in 3 years. How do you do that? 20 million people a year, either through biological warfare or nuclear weapons. And that's what they had. I mean, how do you, all the cities that were just obliterated. I mean, the Germans only had 750,000 guys up there, They only had so many tanks, so many guns. It's even if they had perpetual machine guns, hard to kill 60 million people just with a gun and a artillery shell. I mean, look at World War One. They had close to 7 million guys on a line, and they knew it. The line never changed, so they were shelling each side continuously, right? And if it hadn't been for the Spanish flu, they would have lost maybe 1 million or 2. The thing that lost a lot was the Spanish flu. And they only call it the Spanish flu. It came from America, actually. It was a swine flu. It came from the first humongous pork pen was out there in Kansas, and they employed like 600 people and cutting up cows and killing them. And the World War One takes off. So they're nearby that facility, that pig slaughtering house. There was a military base, and I've been there like since the Civil War, right? And the Indian Wars. And but the Spanish-American War became a training kind of processing place for the people in the West there, right? Because it had railroads and other things, transportation. And so it had a facility, but after the Spanish-American War, it kind of went into mothballs. But World War I comes, and it gets spun up again. So they had 70,000 young men there. So the Park Place, which is just, down the road from them, no more than 10, 15 miles, there is 600 guys working there. Well, they start to all get sick, right? And a few who aren't really getting sick like those guys decided, I don't have a job. If I leave this job, what am I going to do? Well, I can go join the army. So they did. So about 100 of those 600 guys who were already infected, but not really sick, went and joined up. And they got processed there, and they were doing their first level of training there. And within a matter of weeks, those 100 guys got as sick as the guys over there. And they got those 70,000 sick, right? And the army, in its wisdom, instead of like keeping all those people there, they let them go. They put them on the train to get on the boat. And the boats, people got, half the boat guys died before they even got to Europe. And and then they got to France, and then they got put on the line, and then everyone got it, right? And why it's called the Spanish flu is that Spain was, they weren't involved. They weren't fighting. Hey, we're not involved, right? And so they didn't have the repression of the news media that England, United States, Germany, France had, right? They had, you didn't talk about that stuff. I mean, millions of people are dying, and really, they were dying bad. I mean, what we're dying is just, they went, they take them off the ventilator and they die. These folks were coughing. They basically drowned in their own phlegm, and they were coughing so hard, they ruptured their eyes, their ears, their nose, their mouth, their organs, and they bled out. Not a pleasant way to go. And Mr. Fauci, Anthony is in a long line of guys like that, because a lot of people made money out of the Spanish flu. So the Spanish guys actually, because they weren't, didn't have, restrictions on their news, they were actually saying, hey, look what's happening. And not only here, but they were saying around the world, they had, guys and people, there were Spanish guys working for Spanish newspapers who got put in jail in America. We have some serious laws on the books that Woodrow Wilson put in there. And, they're going to use them on the person they're going to use as a poster boy of this is Mr. Assange, WikiLeaks boy, and all he did was what the New York Times did. People gave him information. He put it out on his website, It's just that he was, putting out, it's one thing for the New York Times to go on about, how terrible China and Russia are, but they don't really go on about what's going on here, really, unless it serves their, the people who own them, their political needs. And that's why MSNBC has been going after Carrot Head, for the whole time he's been president, and so there we go. Let's see what else we're saying here. Yeah. So what we have to do, the elite, is, they're going to kill themselves. We don't have to kill them. They're going to kill themselves. Meaning I was trained, to be a ninja, basically. But my sensei basically said, okay, I'm teaching you this only so you know what other people may do and how to get away from them, right? But I don't want you ever to do this, right? You are never to harm anyone. You're my adept, you're my student, and for me to sign on for that, you had to agree to learn things from me in the way I wanted to teach it to you. 1, 2, you need to learn this stuff and then go forth and teach by example. And why do you think I do this show? Because I like doing the show? Yeah, I like you guys. I like talking. I like seeing what you have to say, right? I like responding to that. But there's only 4 folks here. Now, all of you have given me thumbs up. That's very nice of you. But, the powers that shouldn't be, the usual suspects, the sock puppets. The best sock puppet I know is Boy George of Facebook. Boy, that guy I can't even believe he's human, So, so, let's see, where are we? But the Koch brothers are just really like that book, Cokeland. It's really the bold Koch brothers. They had an economist. Oh, I forget his name. He actually got a Nobel Prize. And that thing that Tomboy read, get rid of this, get rid of this, get rid of that. That economist wrote for him. And that economist worked for the Ford Foundation, worked for Henry Kissinger, worked for Grzegorz Gombinsky, worked for the CFR, Trial Out Commercial, Bilderbergs, you name it. And he got a Nobel Prize because he basically said the rich own everything, the poor middle class should just die. And that whole Agenda 21, where we're going to get rid of everybody but 500 million worker drones, that is Starfleet. That is the whoop-de-doo of whoopee planets. Let's see. To a town near here. Yep. The Nazis in Ireland. Yep. Well, that was part of what was known as the Catholic Roman Church's rat line. Yeah. What was that VW engine that got high miles? Well, basically what you have to do, I think I've told this story many, many times, so I'll do it quick. Grandpa Stahl got me into Cooper Union. Cooper Union had an engineering school, architect school, art school. To go there, you had to study, if you were an engineer, you had to study architecture and art. If you were an artist, you had to study, and it was about making a community. And every student that went to Cooper Union paid nothing, free, F-R-E-E. But you had to be the Uber student. You had to be, that community. You had to serve, right? So I went, and at 6, and you were supposed to be 20. You couldn't, they wanted a mature person to be part of that school. So, Grandpa Stahl said, you need to go to this place. And he marched me down to that school, went to the president of the school who owed Grandpa Stahl, everyone owed him a favor. He was like Don Corleone of the electric world, right? And so he went in there and said, hey, how you doing, Bob? Listen, this kid, he's my grandson, and he's going to school here tomorrow. Starting tomorrow, he's going to be in your he needs to be in your electrical engineering, and not first year, but, junior, right? And a guy goes, so how old is he? And Grandpa says, he's 16. And he says, I've already told him everything he needs to know up to this point. But he needs, to get somewhat indoctrinated in the corporate textbook of electrical engineering. He needs to know that. He doesn't need to believe it. He just needs to know it, be exposed to it, right? So he's not going to go, he's not matriculating. He's going for that. And the guy said, fine. So, Grandpa Stahl and I went, and but as we're walking out the dog, guy says, tomorrow, what are you doing tomorrow, kid? And I go, look at Grandpa Stahl, and Grandpa Stahl looks at him, and the guy says, send him here in the morning. I need to talk to him, get him on the right page, and then I'll stick him in there. And so Grandpa said, fine, And, then Grandpa looked at me and said, don't worry about me. I won't walk in front of any buses. I don't need you to keep me from walking in front of a bus. I'll be a little more attentive. Okay. And I said, yes, Grandpa. So I went to school, went first one in, we talked. We went down and had coffee and a little bun and talked. And then he introduced me to a bunch of people. Then he took me to that class, like junior year, corporate electrical engineering department right there. And he got there about 10 minutes before the class started. The guy's there preparing. He goes, listen, this kid's coming in. He's going to be there. He's got to be here. Don't worry about it. Right? You don't have to matriculate him. He just needs to be exposed to what you're teaching. You're so great a teacher, And the powers that be want him to be here, so he's going to be here. Okay? And the guy said, whatever. So, I sat down. The guy came over to me. We talked just a flash of a moment, and I could look at this guy and tell him he was a putz, right? He was dressed in a total suit, and he was smoking a cigar in a pipe. I mean, if that didn't make it like this guy's a moron. Anyway, so I'm sitting there, and I'm like in the front row, right? And I'm dressed nice. I put on my go-to-church school kind of clothes, not my working clothes. Anyway, so the guy's up there, and he's doing a field equation, for a transformer, right? And he's going, and he's like filling the whole freaking, blackboard with his equation. And I put my little hand up, and he looks down at me, and everyone's just scribbling away. They're not daring to ask a question. He goes, what do you want? And I said, you've got it wrong. And he goes, what? And before he says anything more than what, I get up there, raise half the equation, put down the things, the meat of the matter, and then work it out from there in a very short bit of an equation, right? And and he hasn't gotten the answer yet, but he's just about to. And that's why I raised my little hand, because I write down the answer. It's like, 475.234, right? But he's going to go down to 19, right? Because he's done this gigantic equation, right? And, so I have the answer. I basically have the answer. Before the dot is really all you need. But 3 positions after the dot is good for the variables. But you don't need anything more, right? So he's really pissed off because he knows the answer. Kids don't know the answer. But so he's not going to go any further. And I've already raised half this equation. And he goes, but you didn't do it to the 19th. And I said, you don't need to. This is called the field equation for a reason. And he goes, what reason? I said, it's done in the field. You're talking about tuning a transformer, right? A high voltage transformer for transmission of electricity, not, some, whoop-de-doo equation. So it's a field equation. You just got to know these 6 numbers. That's it. That's all you need to know to tune that transformer. That's why they call it a field. It's done in the field. And he goes, yes. So it's about the EMF. Yes. It's about the electromagnetic field or force. But that's not what the equation's about. It's about working in the field and tuning that transformer. Anyway, he was like, right? I'm 16. He's 52. He's been doing it for 30 years, So he kicks me out, right? And, marches me down to the guy's office and throws me in there. And there I am sitting in front of the head guy's office. And I haven't lasted more than 30 minutes in that class. And the guy looks at me and goes, I told you not to say anything. I said, yeah, but he goes, listen now. We all know you're a smart kid. If Grandpa Stahl walked you in here and had you, and I say yes, because I know you're a smart kid, but you're never gonna be able, if you can only last a half an hour with that guy, you're never gonna last a second with the corporate world, ever. They're not looking for what you're selling here, right? Which is understanding truth, freedom, doing it to serve people. And they're not about that. They're about making money and keeping power and control. He goes, I know you know everything about Tesla. I know we talked. I know you know about working class. I know you know that in the 1890s, Tesla was offering the world freedom. And, Rockefeller, Morgan, and Rothschild said no. So that's the encapsulated thing in less than an hour, and I'm 16. So I'm like given here's a guy who's head of one of the most prestigious universities in the frigging world. No one really knows anything about it because it's so freaking prestigious, because they're free. The people who started it wanted freedom. So they took all their money, endowed this school with it. And the only reason Cooper Union's in a little bit of a trouble now is that the sock puppets kind of got a hold of it, and through a investment crew, basically got rid of their money. So they've had to sell good chunks of their real estate in New York. Anyway, that's their problem. So he goes, but listen, we have a department now that's just coming online. It's called Alternative Technology. You'll be perfect for those guys. So he walks me down to that guy's classroom, sets me in, and it's totally different. Everybody in that class wore black pants, white shirt, black tie, had their slide rule on their hip, right? Everyone in this class, nobody had a slide rule. I mean, there was one over on the table if you needed it, but that was it. Everybody kind of was doing it in their head, like I did, like kind of. I'm not so much brilliant enough to do it in my head, but if you give me a piece of paper, I can do it. So anyway, especially since I know the shortcuts. So I'm sitting there and I go, yeah, this is the guy. So he's just telling stories about, he's being a griot of electrical wizardry, right? And I look around and mostly everyone is like me, neatness kind of clothes, but not the black pants, white shirt, black tie. But over in the back by the window, a bunch of guys who are like smoking pot, and jeans and boots and leather jacket, and my kind of guys, right? So the guy goes, sit wherever you want to. So I walk over to where those guys are smoking pot. Now I knew a lot about pot. I wasn't really a pot smoker per se, but I liked hanging out with the guys who did smoke pot because they were creative, they were interesting. The more they smoked, the dumber they got, but the dumb crap that they would say would be at least interesting, right? So anyway, the guy goes, listen, the first day of class here, this is the story, I didn't even give you a syllabus, so this is the story. No tests, no quiz, no papers, no nothing. We just talk about this stuff. And I want you to think of something that will change the world for the better, some technological thing. And he gets everyone to stand up. He goes, okay, everyone stand up. And we all stand up. And he looks at us, and we're over there as a group by ourselves already. He goes, you guys are group A. And then he goes, okay, everyone count off. There are about 30 people there. He says, count off to 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right. And 2 people, when they got, the guy said 7, they said 8. And he said, okay, you're out. And they go, but, and they said, listen, if you can't even count to 7, you're out. So two left that minute. And so I was with those guys. And he goes, so in the library, I have, and there's 6 groups of you. You will go to the library, ask the librarian for, to be admitted to the special library, the reserve library. And in it, there will be books that you will read. And that's why you're not having a textbook. We're going to have you read this. We're going to have you read, Ohm's thesis. We're going to have you read Coulomb's. And they wrote loads of books about all this stuff, right? And so, we went and read about real stuff, right? And so we were like, and because these guys already knew the story, they were all those scientists, weren't businessmen, but they were members of mystery schools, right? They were, Gurdjieff, Ouspensky, um, Steiner, Madame Blavatsky. They were scientists, but they were coming at it from a whole different point of view. And so was Tesla, so was Ohms and Coulomb and Ben Franklin. I mean, Franklin understood string theory. You should read some of his stuff. So, that's what we read, not some stupid textbook, right? Because we were looking at alternative technology, and that's why I keep saying, hey, we have to look for an alternative aesthetic to what's going on right here, right now, right? And there's only 3 people, but there's 4 thumbs up. Good on you, gang. I like that. So, yep, humans coming to a town near you. Yep. What the law is, it's called when you 50 or 100 years ahead in tech. Yeah, and we're so one of the great things of being in this department, there were guys like my so we're smoking pot over there. Our teacher is smoking pot right there. He's got some pretty good kush too, and he's got his, instead of the pipe with a cigar in it, he's got some kush in there. So man, you walked down that hallway, it was like levitating, right? Anyway, so I learned very early that if you have a good teacher, you just don't see them in the classroom because they all have, student teacher hours. And usually no one shows up. But I would, so I would go talk to him about the mystery schools. Because I was, by this time I was already, Madam Olga Kluver was already cluing me into that humanity has been on this earth for 1 billion years in different forms. This is just this, model of the ugly bag of water. We've been other things, right? So, and within the mystery schools, you go study, and that's why a good example, the pyramids in Giza, right? That's technology, not just, it's not a thing built, it's not a mausoleum built for a king. No, it's technology. And it was built by people who had super duper technology, way ahead of what we got. We couldn't do what they did. I mean, they brought gigantic blocks, 60-ton granite blocks, like 500,000 of them, and stuck them together like Legos. And to this day, you cannot stick like a hair between these things have been cut so perfectly and put together so perfectly that you can't get anything like, there is nothing to chink away to, like there's no mortar, no nothing, and no water gets through it. I mean, it's a technology that, right, and there's a lot of that kind of technology all over the place. The pyramids everywhere in the United States and Ireland and Europe and Asia, you name it, South America, they're every friggin' where, out there in the Midwest, they call them Indian mounds, but with ground penetrating radar, you can see their friggin' pyramids, and that's why they're not touched. If they were Indian burial grounds and they were sacred to Indians and they found gold or diamonds or coal there, man, they would dig it up like that. Well, they found a lot of important minerals under these things, and they haven't dug them up because they want no one to know that this technology exists. And that's what was amazing about that department, alternative, because we invented, like the electronic, smart meter. I hate to say this, but we invented that in the 60s. So because we ran that whole building on when we did research on wind generators, right? And when they were like making the big pinwheels, that's the stupidest way to harness wind. how the Dutch did it. They didn't, those things where you see the big sails. Well, that was the first generation. They had barrels that were about 40 feet high, and they would put them right at the perfect spot on a hill, and the wind would be hitting it. And they had vanes all the way around the barrel, and they could adjust those vanes to get the most torque out of that. And the barrel was sitting vertically, so there was a shaft went down, went to one gear. That's it. Whereas with pinwheels, it's like a Rube Goldberg, like you can't believe. But it makes GE a lot of money, and they break like you can't believe. Where these things wouldn't break, because when the wind got to a point where it's too much, the vanes would be pulled in, and the wind would just go around the barrel. And so we took that technology, and instead of making it 20 foot high, we were making them 5 foot by. And New York City was very special. Their architecture, the wind's coming straight off the Atlantic right into the harbor, and there's the East River and the Hudson River, and the wind does certain things in different places just by the architecture and the way the avenues are. And Cooper Union, 10th Street, went from Cooper Union all the way from the east side over the west side, and they owned all those buildings. And they were all like 19th century architecture, so they all had ledges. So we went up there and we put these 5 foot by 4 foot barrels, and we found generators, 500 horse generators that we could just put right underneath them and put it in low torque, and it would kick out like 20 kVA for each one of those suckers, right? And then we put it into high voltage, we could send it around the world, right? And so we did stuff like that, right? And we were just, I was 16. So our little group, each of those projects were like everybody projects, right? But the project that we did, our little group, right? So these guys, they were in their 20s, and they had gone to other colleges to get into this college, right? And because they really wanted to study this from guys like our teacher. And so in that way, not the stupid way like the engineer guy who threw me out within a half an hour, but this way, right? And so, and what we would do, we would go to the library, we read that stuff, we take notes, and I was an electrician. One of the guys was a kicker a mechanic. Another was a painter, but he was like, drew paintings, but he painted people's houses for his living. Everyone had a trade job, and it came from their grandfather and their father, and so they were doing better than just a job. But their parents wanted to be college grads, so they let them live at home, make some money, go to school, and spend all that time. And the mechanic guy on Avenue B had a garage, right? It looks like had been a Exxon, a Shell or whatever, SO, and but he didn't sell gas. He just fixed cars, right? So he had 3 bays, a little office, and a big room back. Had been a kind of warehouse for parts, right? Before parts places. The guy who did this in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, he basically, had a junkyard. He had a big lot, big junkyard, took things off, fixed them, put them on, so a big space, right? So, and in that big space, he had a pretty good shop, meaning milling. He had a Bridgeport, which is a milling machine that you can cut gears, which is very, very precise, difficult kind of thing. And he had other milling equipment and welding, and he had spray metallings. First time I fooled around with spray metallizing, and we could fabricate virtually anything, and that's where I got my fabricating chops. And so, a few years later, I was fabricating gizmos that the mobsters needed because they had these porno shops with peep shows, right? And they'd have one girl in the middle, and they'd have these booths around her, maybe 5 to 12 booths, depending on the size. And the guys would get, this is so they wouldn't have problem with prostitution, etc. They would, at the guy at the desk, they'd give him $10 and he'd give him $10 worth of minted porno coins, right? And they would put them in the slot of the peep show, and there was a window that you couldn't get through, and but you put a quarter, and the sheet would come down so you could see the girl, and she'd be playing with herself or doing whatever he wanted. Then there was another thing: you could put a coin in, and you could pick up a phone, and she would, there was a microphone and speaker there, and she had also a little thing in her ear, so it wasn't, everyone didn't hear what everyone said, but she had a microphone anyway, so you could talk to him, put some coin in there, and there was a little door where you could put even more coins in, and it would open up, and she could put her hand and touch you. So that's a peep show, right? Well, all that technology was like built in the 1920s, right? And they lasted pretty good until they didn't. And then the guys who made that stuff weren't around. So, I had from early on, Grandpa Stoll and I, Mike Stoll did the big job, built, stores and apartment houses and hospitals and stuff. He had a union crew, right? Grandpa Stoll fixed stuff, right? Things that had been made in the 20s, 30s, and 40s that no one could fix or even understood. He knew it, right? So we would go fix it. And in Soho, there were all these factories making buttons and zippers and all kinds of crazy stuff with machines that were built in the 1890s, and we'd fix them, right? And they were all electromechanical. They all had relays and all kinds of sensors and stuff, that now would be run by a computer. So that was the same kind of technology the peep show was. So, I got to know Mike Finelli. He had a lot of these peep shows, and I was doing electric work for him. And he goes, "You're a smart kid. I want to take you someplace." He takes me a peep show, and there's nobody in it, right? Because all of the rooms have broken one at a time, and then slowly to the point there's no, right? He goes, "I make a lot of money for this, but no one can fix these. Can you?" And so I said, "Well, let me see." All right. So I kind of took one apart, saw how it worked, and said, "You know what it is that the call box, the thing that you put the coins in, those, the other things have been replaced. It's just a simple relay here and a motor there. Those things have been fixed. But these little boxes, they're like a sacred little, no one's, if anyone took it apart, they'd have no idea what the prick it is. I think I can manufacture something that will do this, that won't quite be this, but it'll do it, right? And you'll go back to business. You can still slip the coins in there." It goes, "Great." And that's when, I was hanging with the boys at the garage, and they had this great shop. So, we got an ungodly amount of money for every one of these little devices we made, and we made hundreds, right? And now, laws and culture has changed, and now the girls, you go to the VIP lounge, but this was a more controlled version of the VIP lounge. But the reason why the VIP lounge is because they got infrared TV cameras everywhere. So you go in there, it's darker than dark. You don't think anyone's looking at you. They are videotaping you from every angle. So if you are a person that they want to control, they got you, right? So anyway, so that was the kind of garage this was. Really, yeah, he was fixing cars. But so I had gotten myself, so, I grew up in New York. You don't need a frigging car in New York. You got the subway, the bus, a cab. And but I started doing these jobs that I couldn't just carry my tools in a bag to them. I mean, I needed a truck that had boxes that had stuff in it, right? So, Mike, the guy who, Grandpa Stoll's son, Mike Stoll, they were both Mike Stoll, senior, junior. But Junior never liked being called Junior. So no one called him Senior. They just called him Grandpa. And this guy was Mike, right? So, and Mike, I worked for him a lot too as I got older because I could do things that his shop couldn't do. And I fit a certain thing that he needed that no one else could do. And that's why he treated me more like a son than my father ever did. He was more concerned about how I felt, what I was thinking, what was going on, not just, you do what I tell you to do, and he, was a parental force in my life for 20 years until he died, by not him telling me stuff, but me watching what he did. He was the person who taught me how to lead by example. He was amazing, right? Now, Grandpa Stoll, he was just a force of nature. I mean, he was like, and I think like I said, a lot of my clients tell me, Al, you're an acquired taste, and so was Grandpa Stoll because he didn't suffer fools easily. Now, I don't care. See, Grandpa Stoll kind of cared, but I don't care. If you're a fool, good. I just get out of your way. I don't let you, interfere with me. I just, I see you coming and I'm not there when you get here. So it's no big deal. Now, the bus will then hit you. I don't have to say, watch out for that bus. Watch out. That was, I thought that was my job with Grandpa Stoll after the second year. But, when he put me in that place and he said, no, you don't have to watch out for the bus for me, kid. I let you do that because I like you. Anyway, so we're and I have this truck, right? This Ford F-250, commercial, and I don't have a driver's license. I don't. It's Mike's. He's got commercial plates on it. I have a notarized letter saying that I work for him and I can drive, right? And in New York in those times, everyone knew the Stalls. And if I didn't steal it and I was working for him, then the cop would say, fine. I mean, I remember one time how old was I? Well, 15, 16. And I was driving this, and it was big, and I'm still not really big. And the wheel came about here on me, and I'm driving a car like this. And I kind of fly through an intersection and, cut about 10 cars off. Didn't even see it, because I'm like behind the wheel. And, I finally get to a place where I do see the light and I stop. And this cop kind of strolls up to me and says, son, just pull over here. You're almost, there's a bar, you can park here. I just want to talk to you. So right. And he goes, let's see the registration, insurance, blah, 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 and your license. So, because I'm looking like a, 10-year-old behind the wheel. And so, and then instead of a driver's license, I hand him the certified letter from Grandpa Stoll. And he goes, oh, I thought this was a Stoll truck. So, Grandpa Stoll. And I said, yeah, I do. I'm his number one boy. And he goes, my brother, who came back from the Korean War, would have died without those guys. They put him to work. He had real issues, and they stuck with him and actually got him some medical help that the VA didn't even touch. And he's still alive. And I got a godson because of it. And I don't have any kids, and that kid's like my kid. So just look more around. You were lucky back there. I saw you nearly, be careful. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Be careful. So, and that's what I did. Be careful. Don't believe a word I say. So anyway, there we are. We're in the gas station, and I have this truck, and it gets like 0.4 miles to the gallon, but gasoline only cost 16 cents a gallon in those days. So, and it's leaving a black smoke like this was a steam engine, right? And I'm burning wood. Yeah, basically, I am. So, I, we're there, and it's Friday, and Monday is when our project to save the world is due. And these guys are all in their 20s. And if they fail, I mean, they're not going to fail out of this class. But if they were to fail out of this class by not having the project, because this is the only assignment we have is this one, but we've done other projects with the group that we have shined as. And he used to call us the A+ boys, right? So, and he would always make a little humor about, they're not leading you astray, are you? I said, oh, no, they're very, it's a great group. I'm learning great things. So the guy who's the auto mechanic says, don't we have something due Monday? And if we don't do it, we're going to fail. And if we fail, we're going to end up in Vietnam dead. And they would go, yeah, what are we going to do? And the mechanic guy, he was the smartest one of all of us. He goes, and he was changing the oil and looking at my engine, and he goes, I'm looking at this vehicle and realizing that this technology is 100 years old. This is just burning gasoline, carburetor. That's it. There's something really wrong about this. In 70 years, I mean, look, we went from from biplanes and Kitty Hawk to jet planes and rocket ships. We should be having something better than this. And they go, yeah, what? And he kind of goes into his junk pile and he pulls out two, I don't know if any of you remember, Coca-Cola syrup used to come in stainless steel tanks before it came in cardboard boxes that were lined, right? Because they could hold a pressure and they could be sucked into the machine and turned into Coca-Cola, right? That was the syrup. It had a line where it mixed it with the seltzer and your thing, and you had Coca-Cola, right? So he had two of these tanks, right? And he put water in one, and he hooked it up to his air compressor, and he saw which one could hold a better seal, a better pressure, And we, when we saw him doing this, we were like, God, because we would think he's going to blow this thing up and the shrapnel would kill us all. But no, he found one that was better, and he then made a clamp for it. And the truck, under the hood, you could live under there. The engine was so small for the amount of horsepower it kicked out. It was a teeny thing, 8 cylinders, and but it had, like I said, you could live in there. It was gigantic because the truck was pretty wide. And so he puts a tank, right? He makes clamps and welds the clamps to the truck. And so the hood will close and nothing hits this tank. But it's on an angle, right? And he then drills 2 holes, one here, and puts threads on them and puts in a quick release. And then he drills 2 holes and he puts 2 electrodes in them and welds them in. And the thing about this tank was it had a big hole about this big that you could open it up and put the syrup in. Well, you could open it up and put water in, right? So he then took the belt system that runs the fan for the radiator and the alternator to charge the battery. He put another little pulley on it and put another alternator there that went to a thing that made the voltage a little higher and put a bigger battery. So it would charge that battery. That had a voltage a bit higher than the 12 volts that were used to start the car, that were the 24 volts that were needed to run those electrodes at DC to turn that water into hydrogen and oxygen, right? And the tank was this way because it's filled with water, and the two electrodes were in it that way, and they were bubbling up. Hydrogen's lighter, so it's going up here, and that's where one quick release was. And the oxygen was in this neck of the woods, and that's why that quick release was. And then he took the carburetor of the vehicle and drilled two little holes and put quick release threaded things into the carburetor, and then connected the tank with the carburetor with metal guarded flexi hose, right? And we did that in less than 6 hours, right? We had about, I'd say 2 ounces of marijuana and about a case of beer, right? 6 hours, case of beer, 2 ounces of marijuana. And so we turned it up, and we started around 7 p.m. Friday evening. And we got more than halfway done. Then we got really baked, and we documented everything we did so we wouldn't forget it. And then we went off to Luna's for Italian dinner. And then we went over to Buckley's, which was a really nice club in Harlem, and listened to great jazz and flirted with the black girls. And then one of us lived up in that neighborhood, and we crashed at his house. And then the next morning, we kind of got up early. We went to Chinatown for buns and dim sum and good coffee. And we went back to the shop and finished up the job and got done about 1 p.m., right? So we started up. I mean, we didn't have to tweak anything. And we tweaked the carburetor a little bit, but we started like that, right? Because it had hydrogen and oxygen in that carburetor too. I mean, it was not going to be lean. It just exploded into movement, right? And so we went to this gas station that, that guy, my buddy who was a mechanic, knew that guy because they had a shop there too. It's on Houston Street. And they had just introduced this device that measured the hydrocarbons coming out of the exhaust, right? They were starting to try to think about controlling air pollution, right? And so this guy actually had one of those devices where you stuck a little sensor into the exhaust pipe. And, so anyway, the motor's putting away, and he's got the other things attached to the spark plugs and this, that, and the other thing. And, it has RPM meter on it, so he's got a little thing stuck to that meter, and he's looking at it, and he's going, I don't understand. And the guy goes, what do you mean? He goes, well, it's hardly using any gasoline, and yet it's turning out 4 times the RPMs that it should at that measure of leanness that the sensor is picking up. And there is nothing coming out of the exhaust pipe except water. There's no hydrocarbons whatsoever. I mean, we've run this thing for 40 minutes now, and it hasn't shown one iota of hydrocarbons, just water vapor, little hydrogen, little oxygen, but no hydrocarbons, right? What did you do to this thing? And what's this gizmo here? And we said, hey, it's, don't have to worry about it. So we close it, right? And it's almost on E, right? So we go to his gas pump and we put 25 cents of gasoline, which was, like 2 gallons, right? And it's now about 4 o'clock. And we decide that we need a real trial of this, right? So we have the little gasoline gauge is just above E, maybe between E and the quarter, right? And we got like 2.5, 3 gallons of gas in this thing, and we drive all the way to Connecticut to a lobster, fisherman place on the wharf and somewhere in Connecticut. One of the guys knew. And we have a really nice lobster dinner, and we drive home. So we went about 200 miles one way and 400 miles on less than a quarter of a tank. And the sucker didn't even move, right? So we're like pretty proud of ourselves. This is Saturday. So we go out, we put that truck in the garage and like make sure no one screws with this. And we, again, go off and have a nice night. And then Sunday, we kind of I think we went to the beach. We went to Coney Island. And Monday shows up, right? And it's, a 1 p.m. class. And we show up and everyone, and our teacher didn't want us to like just have the idea on what a technological thing could change the world, right? Not even build it, just a rough idea of what it is, how you might think about doing it. That was all you had to do. And have a little, demonstration, science project fair kind of modality, right? So everybody, all the different groups go through their thing. We said we wanted to be last. And so we do. And he's like checking everyone off. And pretty much everyone gets an A. What? So he comes to us and we say, he goes, so what you guys got? He goes, well, we have to show you. And it's outside. So that's why we want to go last, let the class go and we'll show you what we got. And he goes, okay. So he lets everybody go. We go down to where because Cooper Union and where the garage is only about 6 blocks. So we walk the 6 blocks. And we go and we've had him by the garage a few times looking at crazy things we were doing. So he knows where we are. So he walks down there with us, and it's a beautiful day. And it's like, a spring summery day. It's in May. And we show him what we got. We start it up, and we show him that we have, somewhere between less, here's like, half, here's a quarter, and then there's 2/5. And, so we have like that much gas on the thing. And he kind of says, I don't, so he opens the gas tank. He sticks a stick down there, just because we could have been fooling him, right? So, okay, you've got the gas at the gas thing. So we drive all the way to Connecticut, have a lobster dinner, drive all the way back. We didn't even put anything in it. We just left, what was left from the 25 cents that we had bought. And we showed him the receipt, 25 cents. And so, and we had the receipt from the lobster dinner of Saturday to show that, And so, we get back to the garage. We put my truck in there and, we have our little man cave place where we smoke pot and drink and talk about stuff and think about stuff and listen to radio and music and blah, blah, blah. Right. So he goes, okay, you guys, you not only do you get an A, you get an A with a star. Very good. But I had great confidence in you guys that you were going to do something amazing, and you did. Right. And so he goes, so what are you going to do with it? And we go, we're going to patent it and we're going to bring it out to the world and we're going to, and he goes, no, you're not. And we go, huh? He goes, do you think you're the first morons to invent this? He says, what did you thought of this Friday, right? You like, what did you have? 2 ounces of pot and, some beer, and you did it in 10 hours? I said, well, about 6. And he goes, say, you think you're the first guys to do this? No. And everyone who's done this has ended up dead if they pushed it. A lot of people came out with it, went through the usual procedure of going to engineering things and have them look at it, and then somebody would come and buy it from them for $1 million, and that would be that. But they said, oh no, I'm going to bring it forth, and and so going to take it out of Al's truck, and you're going to forget that you ever did this, and do other stuff. Right? He goes, I mean, our barrel generators, our digital electric meters, photovoltaic, those are good things. Those will be accepted in the business world, and they will do good, positive things. So anyway, that was it for me. I mean, I wasn't like them having to matriculate and stay there so they wouldn't go to Vietnam War. I went back to high school. And years later, right, I bumped into one of my friends. It was like, whoa, what have you been up to? Now, he was the painter guy, right? And why he was a painter is that his father and his grandfather had billboard business, right? And basically would paint the things. And that's how I learned how to paint. One summer, I got a job with those guys, and they taught me how to paint perspective, how to do trompe-l'oeil, how to make the graph, on a big thing and draw it. So, the woman's like this with the big orange, I learned how to do that, and that's what got me into being a painter. And I did it again when I did sets at, Juilliard, and then when I worked for Lester, right? So these are all skills I would accumulate and then reuse them in my own little fashion wherever I was. But I met him and said, so what are you doing now? And he goes, well, I've kind of moved into, and this is like in the 90s, right? And he had, they not only did, billboards and painting them, they also did neon, right? And his grandfather was a big freak in neon. So he was a big Tesla guy. And it was, that's why this guy was going to electrical engineering. Anyway, so they had owned over the years, gotten a good portion of the neon signs in Times Square, like 80% of them, right? And so he, being the guy he was, kind of switched up into diodes, LEDs in the 90s, before really anybody else was doing it. And he still had neon because neon had certain colors and certain punch and certain stuff. But he had this mix of neon and made everything digital. And he put these little barrel generators up there with the things because it was really windy up there. And Con Ed was charging them a fortune for the electricity. So he said, screw them. I'm just going to make my own electricity for each sign. And so they basically, he did that all the way up to, into the O's, right? And that's kind of when I met him, in the O's. And what happened was New York City had a blackout. And the only place in all of New York City that still had light was Times Square, with the lights that this guy had that were diodes that took in neon that took virtually no electricity. And it was being run by these wind generators that went into, stacks of batteries that went into high voltage transformers, and bingo. And it was seen from space by satellites. I mean, all of New York City and Queens and everything is black except Times Square. It's still freaking lit up. So, within a week, he had guys at his front door saying, no, you can't. And he became a billionaire. He said, okay, I understand how it works. You want this, and, you understand what I'm doing. You want it to stop? Buy my business. Well, how much you want? A couple million, 20 million? What's it worth? He said, well, how about $5 billion? And they said, no problem. They didn't even blink. And don't believe a word I say. But give me some more thumbs up. Come on, more thumbs up. More, let's get some more people subscribing. This is pretty pitiful. I'm telling some, even if this ain't true, it's a great story. Come on. Let's see. Sad story. No, it's not a sad story. It's the War of the Worlds. Yeah, kind of. Yeah. And that's what this, Graham says, we can be much better and have a cleaner earth. I mean, this is, they're really seeing, like California, no one's driving around. This is the cleanest air they've had in California since they started taking the real scientific notation in the 50s, right? Right. I mean, I just say that as a disclaimer, so no one, don't believe a word I say, So, and if you really needed, like, when I got really sick about 8 years ago, 2012-ish, because I got really sick in 2012 and ignored it until 2014, and that's when I died in that plate of spaghetti. So, and the medical model, basically, that in 08 kind of took whatever I had away, right? And I didn't need all that stuff I had. I didn't need that money, didn't need those investments, didn't need those properties, didn't need any of that stuff, right? It was more like, you remember in Christmas Carol when Scrooge meets his old buddy Marley, and Marley was deader than a doornail. I mean, that's how Christmas Carol starts. And he sees him, he's the first ghost to show up, and he's chained in these boxes. What are those boxes? But his safety deposit box that he had all his gold in, right? And that was what my stuff was. And that's why I died, to get rid of that stuff, right? So I had no stuff anymore, still don't, and it's better. Man, the level of freedom with no stuff is amazing. But so I used to, I was still have the school. I couldn't get rid of that until John came around and bought it. He was, the universe brought John to me because John needed to be at that school. Now, John has no idea what that school is or the power of that school or how it can help him out, but he'll learn. I tried. I spent 2.5 years. There was no, user's manual. I was trying to give him the uptake on, hey, this is what this place is. And you saw me. You go, especially the ones where I'm doing something, right? When we had a big ice storm and I'm out there just kind of chopping the ice because I know the sun will melt it as long as it has a path for the water to go. And, that's, it's like Mr. Miyagi, wax on, wax off. I was trying to teach John that way. And John really we get to the point of being upset because I didn't need to be cool or anything or famous or any of the above, just needed to be, I was just me. And the fact that I had the confidence and the comfort with myself, that's what always made him anxious, right? And the fact that, he had been on the YouTube since it began, that's why he has 100,000 subscribers or so, because he was on there when there was nobody on there. And you look at his stuff, it's scary and sad, but it's also somewhat entertainment. It's like, waiting on a corner, waiting for a car crash, But it takes so long. I mean, it's like also watching paint dry, So he then, I start telling him stories to give him, I try to tell him, these stories are for you to learn, but he's like doing this with his little cell phone, then putting it up on his channel. And, bingo, 70,000 people are, I'm going viral, right? But he's getting all the money. He doesn't even tell me he's doing that until someone says, I saw you up on this guy, John, what's his name's channel. And do you know he's doing that? And I said, well, yeah, kind of, but not really. He goes, he must be making some serious, he's probably making $1,500 a month from this. I said, you can make that kind of money on the internet? He said, oh man, come on. Where have you been? So where I was in the woods. So anyway, but before I sold it to John, I had no money, so they turned off the electricity. So in the middle of winter, it's pretty cold, can't stay, couldn't move. So I couldn't chop wood. I couldn't, I could I would go out and get a few branches and make a fire and huddle by it. But I had I had a nice, little pup tent, and I put it on top of my bed, and I had a nice, super duper down thermal, go to the top of a mountain, which I was, sleeping bag, and inside the sleeping bag, inside a pup tent that all zipped up with blankets over the pup tent. When I woke up in the morning, the heat of my body was making the inside of that pup tent about 70 degrees. So, I didn't freeze to death when I slept. But during the day, it was pretty cold up there. And I had one window where the sun would come in. And as long as the sun was, but that was between, 8 in the morning and noon or 11. So what I was, 6 miles down the road, they had just built a brand new spanking amazing library. And I went down there, and they actually had a restaurant in the freaking library where you could go and take your little tray and eat anywhere in the library. As long as you didn't make a mess, you can't do that anymore. But you could sit and they had great computers. I mean, and that's where I started writing my novels. Okay, look at this. And I started looking at things on the internet. Oh, look at that. And that was 2015. Yeah, around that, 14 and 15. And all I had, and so I would sit and have my one little cup of coffee. And the guy who owned the place, I knew him. So he told the people who work there, you can give Al as many refills as he wants, before he starts jittering to death. So, and he would say, give him a sandwich too. So a nice guy who owned the place, I got a sandwich and a cup of coffee. I didn't take advantage, 2 cups. That's about it. So I'm there, and I would be sitting in the, where the coffee house was, because they had really nice chairs, very nice lounge chairs. I mean, the chairs for the computers were nice, but not as nice as this. Plus, they had big screen TVs, so I could watch, and they had about 5 of them. So instead of sports, they had MSNBC, they had this, they had that, and on my little laptop was a place where if I went on their website, I could plug into those things in the earphone in my ear, so I could listen to because they had basically the audio. And so I'd be there listening, watching, doing research, and on my little laptop, man, I could have 4 or 5 screens. Somebody showed me how to do that. And I was there, and then, I start chatting with people in the coffee shop, right? And it became a thing for people to come and chat with me, right? It's just like you guys come and chat with me, right? And so the librarian thought it was cute, so she put a bunch of chairs together. So it was Owl's Circle, and I used to have a email account called Owl's Circle, and a website called Owl's Circle. I don't know if they're still in existence. I haven't used them since then because I lost that. The computer died and everything was on it. And so anyway. So I would have the usual suspects. There was a guy who was a computer programmer, right? There was a guy who was a black guy and a doctor. There was a guy who was an NSA, basically spy. He was English, right? And he was, he was M6 and 7 and NSA and the CIA. He was, they're all the same, right? And no one knew who he was. And one day I said, so, what'd you do, for 40 years? Oh, I worked for the government. Oh, so you were a spy. And and this guy was as cool as a cucumber. And and his wife, who was Chinese, she did a spit take. She was drinking something and she just spat it across the room. And she wasn't even in the circle. She was like sitting over there, but she was listening because she was a spy too. And she starts laughing, and he's like awful. I never seen the guy flustered. I never, he kind of turned red, and no one else kind of noticed it, And so I didn't make a big deal of it. I just said, "Oh, so you were a spy." And so the only guy who noticed it was the guy who thought he was the smartest guy of the bunch, and he was a black guy who was a heart doctor, but he didn't do the surgery. He ran the X-ray machine. There is a kinescope. This is before they had CAT scans and MRIs, but they had an X-ray machine that could do a running X-ray of when you're looking at stuff. And problem with that is you were baking the poor person, because one X-ray, which is like 100th of a second, is one thing, but to be exposed to X-ray like that for 10, 15, 20 minutes continuously, not good. And this guy did that. So anyway, and he was a product. His parents were school teachers. His dad was a gym teacher. His mom was an English teacher in black schools, right, in Virginia. Because Virginia's got to be the most, forget Mississippi, forget, Virginia, because when Brown came down, what Virginia did was good. We're out of the public school system. Like the thing that back when we started this with Tom read, the Koch Brothers manifesto, came from this economist who was at Virginia, UVM, right up there in not Blacksburg, in Christiansburg, right, where they had the kerfuffle where the girl got run over. And that neck of the woods has been that way forever. And so this guy, he got his Nobel laureate writing a economic thesis where only rich people should have money, everyone else should die, and he got a Nobel Prize for that, right? Anyway, so he basically suggested to certain people in the Virginia government in the 50s, well, why don't we just close all the public schools? Nobody go to public school. Rich people will be able to buy that nice public school for pennies on the dollar, and then just send white people because it would be a private school. And that's exactly what they did for 6 years. For 6 years, poor white people and black folk got no education whatsoever, right? So one of the major reasons that black folk got a hand up by, I forgot what they call it, but when you were a black kid and you wanted to go to college, and they let you in over the white kid, that was to make up for things like that. Was so egregious, and that had gone on until the mid-60s. And that's why they kind of passed that law to give, what do they call that? Whatever they call that. Anyway, this guy, who is the X-ray, he was just basically a fancy X-ray, but he would say he was a heart doctor, right? And I said, so you're a surgeon? No, I'm not a surgeon. So you're this? No. So you're a X-ray pathologist? Yes, that's exactly what I was. Yep. Mm-hmm. So I said, you were baking people with X-ray, right? And he was like, well, I said, so what, you have, big lead things on your nuts? He said, well, I never wanted to have kids anyway. Anyway. So we would be in these conversations, and I would tell these stories, and everyone would be semi-enthralled. And but when they were right there, I would I wouldn't totally occupy the conversation like I do here, because I'm looking straight at that little camera there. But I go back and read what you guys said. So John, somewhat John, St. John. Just buzzing, folks. No need for bad comments. Yeah. But audit myself. Yep. That's all we have to do is audit ourselves, but not in the way a lot of people in the news business do. They instead of having somebody say you can't do that, they just don't do it, because they're like Rachel Maddow of MSNBC. She makes $30 million a year for doing that stupid show, just because she was a Rhodes Scholar. I should be paid compensation for being bought into the monetary world. No kidding, Josh. So say we all, I keep telling AI, buddy, go tell your overlords to hire me because I used to work for them. They got my resume. But the basket of banksters, basically what's going to happen is, so before this pandemic or scandemic, now it's, exactly kind of what our friend Mr. Critical Thinking tells us, and it's at the beginning. Go to the beginning of this and you can see him. I usually play a little bit of him. Cliff High, I think is his name. And he is a computer programmer that specialized in making computer models. And he mostly worked for DARPA, and he mostly worked on modeling nuclear war, modeling chemical war, modeling biological war. And he was one of the first people I noticed said, hey, this is a biologic weapon here. And he, again, I don't believe anything that I show you or that I see, but it's information that you need to know so you can make up your own mind. And that's why I kind of take my cell phone instead of me trying to manhandle it and explain it in my way, because I tell these stories that are god awful long. Look how long it took me to describe, Graham somewhere an hour and a half ago asked me if I ever heard of a car working on water. It took me an hour and a half to tell you that whole story about it. So that's why I do the thing with the, I show Richie from Boston and, dark journalist and you name it. And that's why I do it, And Tom, what's his name? Because he read that thing from the Koch brothers. That came from that economist guy, and I will find out his name for the next show. But all of this is, nothing happens by chance, right? But the lesson that we are here to learn tonight, and that's what I'm going to segue right into, is, I am as God created me. We will repeat today's idea from time to time, for this one thought would be enough to save you and the world, right? Meaning, hey, I am love's co-creation, right? I am the artist in the first person. I am that sanctified savage, right? Not a consumer, that's what the whole movie, Brad Pitt seems to play this character over and over again. He played it in Fight Club. He played it in the 12 Monkeys. He keeps playing this character who's, gonna, save the world by killing it, blowing it up, because we're too deep into our own consumerism, right? Fight Club is an amazing movie. I mean, so is 12 Monkeys, but not, Bruce Willis, I think that's his best role. Bruce Willis' best role was in 12 Monkeys, right? If you believe that it is true, it is true. And you will save the world by simply living as I am as God created me, and not try and change it, not try to get a deodorant, not try to work out, not try to cut your hair, not to wear better shoes or more sexy underpants or any of the above, right? Why am I wearing this shirt? Because I found it in a bag in leaves, and it hadn't started to rot. I had to wash it in Clorox and a few other products to get the skank out, but it's a very nice shirt, and I got it from a garbage pail in Vermont about 10 years ago or longer, maybe 20 years ago. And it washed out nice, It's made out of a linen-y kind of stuff that is, so I'm not wearing it because it's really expensive. I'm not wearing it because it's the most whoop-de-doo fashion. And someone's going to say, wow, he's got one of those shirts. Well, this is a shirt I got out of a garbage pail that I wore it for a number of years, then put it in a plastic bag and put it in a pile of other clothes in plastic bags and forgot about for about 10 years. And then now that I've been here for the last 8 months, I kind of went through the deep green and I keep coming upon piles. That's where I found these, right? They came, I used to teach this course, these are flashcards of the whole course. It comes in a big, gigantic book called The Course in Miracles. And then there's workbook. And then there's the teacher's guide. Well, it's all in flashcards. That's why I'm reading to you, right? We will repeat today's idea, and you should be saying that this is what prayer is about. Saying ideas like this. Just keep saying this. I am. That's very important. The I am. I am as God created me. Just keep saying that. I am as God created me. Let's hear you all say it now. I am as God created me, right? Just keep saying it over all day long. And then you go and do something else and you kind of forget about it. But once you go, oh, I am as God created me. See how that will freaking change your life and the world around you. It'll blow your freaking mind. So I'm doing this, right? And, 500,000 people should be watching every show I do, right? It should be changing the world. But it is by, 3 of you at a time, And what's really interesting is, I came up with the idea, you guys should join, we went into the wee hours. What time is it now? It's only 9:46. But I was like quitting around 3. Buddy was, I got to go to sleep. I got to shut up, close up, just get out of here. Oh, wow, that story's a pretty good one. Say it some more, So it was one of those where I had been like on 7 hours. And, but I was starting to get tired. And so I said, okay, listen, let's try this. Let's all go to sleep. Because half the people who were listening, it was in the morning, and they had started listening when it was already night. So, so I said, guys, why don't we all go to Dreamy Dreamland? And that's what this is, Dreamy Dreamland. You're kind of asleep. It's like being consciously awake in your dreams. That's Dreamy Dreamland. The Aborigine guy, I told you a story about 2 shows back where I got me and the missus got what is it when they kick you out of the country? Not evicted. There's a term for it when they throw you out of a country. Not evicted, but there's a term. But anyway, and they sent us home in luxury. I mean, and it was called ambassador class, and it was it's like, and how the other half lives, wide awake. So 24/7 Dublin. And yeah, Dublin is awake all the time. So do they close Dublin down? I couldn't see the pubs ever closing. Did they make everyone shelter at home in Dublin? Anyway, so I went up to the lounge. It's a 747. They had a lounge above the ambassador class. And they had a section in the lounge. The lounge was only for first class, but they had a section in that lounge where first class people weren't good enough for the ambassador. So they had an ambassador class. And in that first class lounge, there was a nice little coffee notch where 7 Aborigine guys were sitting in cowboy outfits. And I came up the steps and said, they were right there waiting for me. And I went over them, and I had, in the ambassador class, they gave you like a shawl and, all kinds of things. And so I was wearing this kind of little, much more than a shawl because it had sleeves. It was like whatever they call that jacket you wear when you get out of bed. Anyway, but it was silk. Had the name of the, airlines. It's an ambassador class, So it's pretty hard to miss that, right? So, and the guy who is serving the ambassador class, oh no, sir, you're this is the ambassador class over here. I said, well, I want to talk to these guys. I'll sit over here. Just bring me to the ambassador service over here. Oh, we can do that. No problem. So that's fine. We, you can mix with the lower class, So I sat with the Aborigine guys, and the first thing the guy said out of his mouth was, "How'd you like your first night in Australia?" Anyway, so in our long conversation, and I had him bring over, because I know these guys like to get buzzed, so I had him bring champagne and VOS, really nice brandy, and these guys did it. But after they drank 2 bottles of champagne and 1 bottle of VOS, they said, "We want beer." I said, "What kind of beer you want?" So they had beer, but the last thing he said, "Remember Dreamy Dreamland? That's where you live." And that's where we live. And so I invited everyone to come to Dreamy Dreamland. And our brother, what's his name? Dragon, did it. Right. And the next morning, when I went on, he was like, wow. And he was, because it nearly scared the crap out of him, because he experienced, end of, everyone living in caves and nuclear war and really bad stuff. And then he woke up and he was freaked out, because he was there, he was living it, he was believing it. And I had done the same thing. But instead of experiencing that, I was experiencing waking up in the morning, taking a shower, leaving my friend's house and going a mile down the forest road to the deep green and start puttering around and making myself breakfast on the porch. And it was a beautiful sunny day, a little nippy. And then this thing came out of the sky and it shot. I mean, I looked up at the sky, it was beautiful, and the sun was coming up over the trees, and there were a couple of clouds, but it was blue. And this, like right above me, about 500 feet, there was like a little, like, when you see heat rising off the road in the summertime, it looked like that, right? It was a wobble. And this thing shot out of the wobble, and it was a fast moving, more defined wobble. It didn't look like a ship or a car or George Jetson or anything. It was a defined, that it came from a wobble that wasn't very defined. It just looked like a shimmer of heat, and it came out. But this was defined, and it did circles. It was way up about 5,000 feet, and it kind of circled down until it stopped. And right in front of me was and we had talked that night about Men in Black. And there was a girl who was talking about Men in Black and shadow people and Mothman, and wanted me to tell stories about that. And I never quite got around to it, but I was experiencing it, because I called him Mr. Wobble, because his wobble, which was well defined, was a black. It was a beautiful sunny day. It couldn't be any more sunny than it was. And he was there. So I've seen Men in Black, and I've seen shadow men, which are really strange, because you see them out of the side. You don't really look at them. They're just, you see the shadow, and it's like in your peripheral, right? And I've seen the Mothman too in New Mexico, right? And that's of all the, because that's more physical than either of those other two characters. And Mothman, to me anyway, and I've seen it 3 different times. I saw it once in England, out in the country near Stonehenge, and I was staying with some friends, and we were camping near Stonehenge, but you can't camp on Stonehenge unless you got a permit and a whole bunch of stuff. But you can go visit it. So there was a place, a woods, 2-mile walk through the woods. Not if you went out and got on a road and drove around, it might take you 8 miles. But coming from that woods down this hill and around, you came out to a road and you walked on the road a little bit, and there's Stonehenge. Anyway, we were camping out up there, and we were like down bow camping too. Didn't have a fire, but it was, I don't know if it was a full moon, but almost. Anyway, so we had a nice camp spot, and we had a fire to cook on. Well, once it got dark, and it was so dark in that woods that any kind of light would have shown up down, and we were somewhat through the woods. You probably could have seen our fire from the road. So we didn't want any real attention, but we it was when it was before the sun set, we cooked dinner, not a problem. Morning, we made breakfast, not a problem. Making coffee and eggs, not a problem. But anyway, but my friend had, a nice little stash with him, and a nice little, canteen of a nice vintage, and so we got a little buzzed and telling stories, and so we had a little privy, but it was a good, there was a privy there. Someone's other campsite had dug a hole and made a nice little privy and covered it, not like filled it in, but made it so other people could use it if they were camping in the neck of the woods. And they're all druids anyway, so they Anyway, so I had my little walking stick, and I was walking along the way, and the moon's out, like I said, not quite full, but bright enough to make it easy to walk. And this wasn't a really super deep forest that we were kind of camping in. And so I'm walking out of that and walking towards the privy, and this thing flies by me. I mean, just right in front of me. And it was whiter than white, right? And it reflected the moon like you couldn't believe. And it had a wingspan of at least somewhere between 12 and 20 feet. I mean, it was like, wow, this guy's big. I mean, and it landed on a tree, big maple or oak or whatever the big trees they got there. And it had a big, thick thing, and it was up there, and it was looking right at me, right? And so I looked at it, and it didn't shimmer, but it wasn't really clear. It was white, and it was, it looked like a chest piece, right? Because it had its wings tucked in, but his talons were, and I was looking at it, and I was looking at the talons, because if that guy wanted to pick me up and rip me up, he could have very easily done that, right? So I'm looking at those talons, and I'm looking at them, and I'm looking at them. And since I am an owl, and I have been attached to owls pretty much from childhood, I'm like going, those are owl's feet, And so as I went from his talons up his legs like this, it became way, way obvious to me it was an owl. Brother Owl. So I said, Brother Owl, how you doing? And he's still looking at me, but not with any real, like, I'm going to eat you, or, I'm going to get you. Just kind of, I'm here to look at you, And so, but when I first saw him, when it flew, because it flew without a sound, no flap of a wing, no nothing. It was like, I walked by it, I didn't see it. It just dropped out of the tree, opened its wings, and went right by me, like right by me, right? And I was like, whoa. And it went all the way up and turned around and landed on this big limb, right looking at me. And the moon's lighting me up, lighting him up. And I don't say anything. I'm just, like I said, I was looking at those talons. And then I said, wow, okay. So I don't know how long I stayed there, but I stayed there a long time. And who's this? Forever somebody. Anyway, so I said, wow, that's kind of interesting. Anyway, I went back, after I used the privy, and I went back, and the guys were already stirring. And I said, what's up? And they said, where have you been? And I said, what do you mean? And I went to the privy. He said, you must have been hours. What were you doing? And then I told him the story of And the guy said, that's Mothman. Mothman hangs out here. And I said, look like an owl to me. But, 6-foot owl, who knows? Don't believe a word I say. Anyway, the other 2 Mothmen I saw were one in Tennessee, and the other, where was the other one? Could have been New Mexico, but that could have been, who knows what that was. That was very weird. Let's see. Anyway, back to Mr. Wobble, right? So it wasn't Mothman, so it wasn't like an owl, but it was this shaky kind of Mr. Wobble, right? And it looked like he was wearing a suit, but the only thing that was in stark detail was its eyes and its mouth, right? And so it zinged around and landed right on my deck, right in front of me. Got my coffee, my egg, tortilla, and I go, well, look at you, So what are you? Mothman? Are you? No. I said, then I said, so are you Shadow Man? And then he said, maybe. And then I said, maybe? And then he said, no. And then I said, how about Man in Black? And he goes, not relevant. Ask a question. So, maybe, yes, no, ask a question, not relevant, was all he said. And pretty much all he said was yes and no and not relevant. The maybe he really used very infrequently, and only when I asked him what he was. And other certain direct things about him or it, because I couldn't tell, what it was. So that came with that dream about a week ago. So virtually, not every night, but almost every night, I go to sleep, bingo, I'm on my deck in the deep green, and Mr. Wobble's in front of him. And I now call him Mr. Wobble, and he seems to be fine with that. And the first 2 times I actually thought, especially the first time, because, I woke up, I took a shower, I went down to the deep green, I was making breakfast, I saw this thing approach, bingo, stick it on my my deck, and I'm sitting in my lounge chair, my folding, camp chair, having breakfast, and ask a question. So I asked him questions, and so we had a nice long conversation about what's going on, the relevant moments of right now, and basically he said, the Course in Miracles, because I found a lot of my books, and so I had a really esoteric book on the mystery schools of the Templars, and one Cabal of the Hebrew nation, and one of the Course in Miracles. And so we were talking about this, and he just kept looking at the books, and I said, so is this what I should be reading? He goes, yes. Anyone in particular? Yes. This one? No. This one? No. Course in Miracles? Yes. And then I said, so I've read this a lot. I used to teach it. Should I be teaching it? Yes. Should I be teaching it on my Dreamy Dream Land channel on you? Yes. Should I do it as I'm teaching the Course in Miracles to you guys? No. Should I mix it in with my stories? Yes. make it relevant. Yes. So that, and then all of a sudden, we're talking about something else, and I take a slog of coffee and it goes down the wrong tube, and I start really coughing. Just really haven't coughed like that ever in drinking coffee. And I woke up in bed and coughing, right? And got whatever that was up and spat it out in my little hanky, and went into John and got some water, and looked outside, and it was dark. I mean, the sun was coming up, but it wasn't the 10 a.m. Sunlight that I thought it was. And I woke up in bed, not woke up, unconscious on my deck or something, but in bed. And it's earlier, meaning when I woke up from the coughing, it was about the time that I woke up in the, what I realized was I was dreaming. Because I had, basically for me to really dream cognitive important dreams, what I do is I meditate before I go to sleep about that. But before I do that, I drink a big cup of water like the Indians, the Native Americans would do, because they didn't have clocks. But if they wanted to wake up because they had to do something before sunrise, they would drink lots of water before they went to sleep, and then they'd have to get up and piss. And so that would be about the time. They wouldn't go back to sleep, they would. But the old shaman told me that, when he was a warrior, yes, he would, do that. But as a shaman, now he wants to dream particularly, he will do the same thing. And he would wake up, take a piss, go back to sleep. And he goes, that's when you're already in Delta at that point. And then when you go back, you are in Delta plus, because you interrupted that thing, but Delta doesn't really end until you finish a dream. So if you get up and have to take a piss and then go back to sleep, it's Delta plus, in that it cuts to the chase to what you meditated about to dream about, right? So when I told the audience, hey, let's meet in dreamland, and I did that, I meditated and went into, I said, okay, I'm going to meet the cadre in dream time. And I kind of did, because I kind of picked up, the only one who said that they did it was Dragon. And I was, when I was looking, on my deck, I woke up, I took a shower, I went down to Deep Green, we started to make breakfast, sat down, started to have it, and realized how beautiful the sky was. I noticed that in the directions of big cities, hundreds of miles, like Washington is probably, I don't know, 600 miles from the Deep Green. Charlotte is probably, I don't know, 250, 300 miles. Roanoke is 170. What's the name of the place where they, in Tennessee, where they worked on the atomic bomb? Oak Ridge. Oak Ridge is about 110 miles as the crow flies. So if someone dropped a bomb on that, which they might, I mean, there's nothing really there anymore, but if they did, I would see it. Even during the day, I would see it. The others, it's a stretch to say I could see those. At night, I probably could. But anyway, so I had a little bit of Dragon's dream of nuclear apocalypse, but I didn't go where he went. And so I'm looking up in the sky for, uh-oh. And then I saw the wobble and the thing shoot out of it and fly down. So I kind of, realized, okay, that was a dream. So I, next night, did it again, saw Mr. Wobble. Third night, I got distracted, didn't do it, went to sleep. I don't even know if I did a live chat that evening. Just went to sleep and didn't think about anything, to dream about anything. So I didn't remember any of my dreams. But the next night, again, I don't remember what I did, but I didn't meditate on, oh, I want to, meet up with the clan, the cadre in Dreamy Dreamland. But I kind of, had, so I've seen Mr. Wobble now 4 times. So he seems to come when he wants to. Let's see, nobody. Let's see, what other thing? I said that I wouldn't show it itself. Let's see. The moon and the talon beats that was trying to swap you up. Not sure even a large beast could pull that off. Well, I was a little lighter in those days. I weighed about maybe 220. And I'm almost down to 220 now. When I died in that plate of spaghetti, I was almost 500 pounds. I was 480 pounds. And now I'm down to 220. So that's pretty good. That's why I'm alive. If I say, I definitely wouldn't be alive at that weight, do. Yes, meaning there are creatures all around us, right around us now, right around, research. There are scary monsters right around you right now. They all are, that demonic realm, that the preachers go on about, that's real, everything that anyone can make up, it's real, according to their imagination, just like Mr. Wobble thought Mr. Wobble was real, and he is, that big owl, don't know what the heck that was, but it was real, and I've seen a lot of stuff. I was at this one event, and we were kind of a community, and the community was very much there's the head dude and a hierarchy, and I was just there to study that scene, right? So, I just came in as a lowly guy who was interested in them and wanted to learn and didn't make a fuss about who I was, but I was very the thing. So we would, part of the teaching thing was we would camp together, because this is in the 1990s, late 1990s, and this guy, our fearless leader, thought the end of the world was coming in Y2K, and he was a real prepper, and we were camping out we were like learning survival and blah blah blah. Anyway, I really like camping. I really have lived with many teachers in that kind of setting, but more real than this guy, because you had to pay. And I was a good electrician. He wanted me to wire his everything for survival. So I did, no problem. So, and, I said, I have no money, but let's trade, so I did, I took care of his everything. And he also saw that I had an interesting perspective on things, and that I wasn't interested in being the top guy or the cadre or even the dude, or, I was happy to be the lowest man on the totem pole, because in the Native American law, the lowest man on the totem pole is the most important, because he is the foundation holding the whole Megillah up. The guy at the top with the big wings and whoop-de-doo, he's the least most important. The guy at the bottom, the little guy who looks like a turtle. Usually a turtle's the foundation. If you look at totem poles, the stockier, get strong, right? Anyway, so he realized that I understood, knew, because when we would what I liked best about this guy is very well read. And so he would talk about stuff that I had read and really liked and wanted to talk about and had nobody to talk about. So he would talk about stuff and he'd throw out a question. And I'd look around and I'd wait and nobody would say anything. And I'd put my little finger up. He goes, "So what do you got, Al?" And I would give him he said, "Okay." And so by, second or third month that I was around, he'd stop waiting for people to say anything. He said, "So what do you got, Al?" So and we would talk. And he said, when end times come, yes, these other guys are my contrary, but you're going to be the one guy I really go to and listen to. I said, "Well, that's very nice. I appreciate that." And the one thing I did that I really, really liked doing was, so we had this campsite, right? And I would show up, and we usually, would be there Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and go back to work on Monday or whatever we're going to. Or some people left on Sunday. But I would get there Thursday, and I would go around and I would clean up the site. I would rake it down. I would, clean everyone's campsite. A lot of people kept their tents there. Others would take them down and bring them up. And I would clean everyone's stuff, and everyone had a little fire pit. He thought that was a good thing, that everyone could make their own little closet, so they wouldn't have to mess up the kitchen. And I would leave piles of wood, just enough to make your coffee or make something in a frying pan, and it would be safe. And I would leave things of water you could drink and water you could put fire out with, and buckets with ash. Because I would clean up every fire pit. I'd scoop all the ash and put it in a bucket so they could put their fire out with ash. And I would, get there Thursday, and I'd clean everything up, prepare everything, get it ready, get the place where he would teach. I would get that ready, make sure, and all the little things that he needed to teach. I would, go to the Dollar Tree and get it, and and I wouldn't do it because it was my job. I wouldn't do it because, I'm trading him for it. Wouldn't do it because, anything other than I wanted to do it for everybody. And he really liked that. And everybody else liked that too. And that I didn't make a big deal out of it. I didn't want to get patted on the back. I just, when somebody would say something, I said, I'm glad you're happy. I'm glad that made you happy. I'm glad that you could have that cup of coffee. I'm glad, I was being, what's the right word? Hospitable. I was Mr. Hospitable. That was I was the master of hospitality. And his wife, who basically cooked everything, I made her job easy too. I would prepare everything. I would get ice. I would do all these kind of things that she would probably have to go do because he would never do it. And I would, talk to her and say, "So what you got planned? Do you want, I'm going to go to the, place, get, farmer's market, get some stuff. I'm going to go visit my farmer friend. Is there anything you want?" And I made, and I would help her prepare the meal. He didn't like me. He didn't want me to be the cook. He wanted her to cook. But I would help her prepare everything for her to cook. So chopping stuff. And so I was Mr. Hospitality. And he liked that because it reflected on him, meaning it was, it seemed as he was Mr. Hospitality. And that was fine by me too, because pretty much everybody who was in that community saw me, knew what I did, knew how it was, knew what it was, right? Was not a problem, right? And so one time it's 4th of July, right? And he's going to have a big 4th, blow things up, right? Because we're learning how to blow things up. So he's going to, he's made rockets and all of this, right? And so there were 4 other guys who were in this community, who we were, the 4 of us, the 5 of us, 4 guys and me, we were the lowest people on the social class, because the other people all had jobs, very important jobs, and they also were married or were pretty women, right? We were none of the above. I was just an electrician. Now, he had no idea what I was making. I was doing pretty good because I was saving the guy I worked for, but so he definitely was taking care of me. But I never flashed anything around because, then he wanted me to pay stuff. As long as he thought I was poor, it was okay. As long as I was fixing things for him, it was okay. As long as I made him look really good, it was okay, right? So I didn't really tell people, I'm an electrician, just working in town. And so these four other guys. One guy had his own little business. He mowed lawns. Another guy was a Xerox fix-it man. He and I bonded because I had worked for Xerox. So we knew all the jokes about toner and the uniform and the whole thing. And there was another guy who was a nurse. This guy was a military guy. He was in Desert Storm. I mean, he was really on the ball. But just because he was a nurse, everyone made fun of him for being a nurse. And he didn't care. He liked being a nurse. He liked helping people, right? And he was more than a nurse. He was in the emergency room. He was a first responder. He was a what do they call it? The guys who help you breathe. He had that. He had a lot of checks in the box. And so, I mean, he could have been a doctor. But he too liked not having to be in the spotlight. The five of us were all folks who didn't have to be. And there was one guy who was kind of retired, and he kind of looked like me now. And so anyway, we would hang out. We'd be very, on top of it. The three guys who were semi-young would, be in the physical side, learning how to kill people, kind of training, me. I said, I'll be the diplomat. And the other guy who was retired said, I'll be the expendable one, like on Star Trek. So we, the five of us, actually had a sense of humor. We didn't take ourselves very serious. Everybody else took themselves really serious. And the women were all vying to be there with, even though the top two was married, they were all, he played around, and his wife kind of, whatever. So, she was just staying there for the kids, I'm pretty much sure. So, one night, 4th of July, and they're blowing stuff over there, and we're sitting, where they had this big, beautiful house, and they had this big, beautiful veranda. And we had this really nice meal on the veranda. But he made everyone eat fast, and then go blow the stuff up because he wanted to blow it up right at a certain time, blah, blah, blah. Well, they all went down dutifully, and we just stayed there and kept eating. Because it's pretty good food, really nice. 4th of July, good stuff, right? And we normally didn't drink anything, but 4th of July, they had a little beer there and a little schnapps. He liked schnapps. So, and I'm not a big drinker, but the other three of the guys were, so they were getting pretty lit. And the other one brought his pipe. Now, we're not supposed to do that on the sacred land there, but, we have a sense of humor. So, and they're all the way down there. They're not going to see us doing this, right? So, we light up. We're eating the canned beans and coleslaw and hot dogs and burgers, and they were all very tasty. And we're drinking a little bit, and he's got these really nice couches that used to be in his living room, but then he got some money from everybody, and he put really nice furniture in his living room. And this is a big veranda with a big roof over it, he put those couches and lazy boys outside. So, if you're sitting out there in the veranda, you could sit in a lazy boy on a nice couch. You could sleep there even. Many a night I slept. He wouldn't let me sleep. He had 5 bedrooms. He had 2 guest bedrooms. And I either had to sleep downstairs on a mat or outside on the couch, which was always very nice. So as long as it wasn't winter. But I, had my own little hacienda in the campsite, but you couldn't do that in the winter. Anyway, so we're there on the couch, eating, drinking, smoking, having a great old time, and kind of cracking jokes about everybody. Because by this time, the 5 of us had enough of the hierarchy of everything and enough of end times at Y2K. It was like And one of the guys, a computer programmer, said, no way. I said, this is just a scam. People are going to make a lot of money with this. And so we all knew this. But his whole authority was built on end times coming in Y2K, and we all have to prepare, blah, blah, blah. But 4th of July, big times, woo! And this was 1999. So these people were celebrating like it was 1999. So, and so they're blowing stuff up down there, and we're just sitting on the couch, and we're looking up, and he started blowing things up around 9, because by that time the sun had gone down. It was still a little bluish, a little pinkish, but it was getting towards night 30, dark 30, and they're blowing things up down there. And he's made mortars, and these things are going up there, and right. But they're over here, and we're facing that away, and there's no moon, and the sun is going down that away, and we're facing east. And there's really nothing that way. No city, no town. That's the darkest part that way. So we're looking over there, and we're just cracking jokes about everything. And all of a sudden, I go, "What's that?" And someone says, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, look right there. What is that?" And it was like someone was up in the sky with a can of spray paint and was tagging the sky, not writing anything, but just smooching, spray paint in the sky in a big way, right? And it started to swirl, right? Swirl. And it was a dimensional vortex. And it was just like that scene out of The Avengers, when all hell loose is coming from that hole in the sky, coming down and destroying New York, and Iron Man saves the day because the military were going to blow up New York and kill millions of people with an atomic bomb, and he grabs it and shoots it up into that. Well, that's what it looked like, except it was swirling. And if you go on, YouTube and say, galactic, dimensional swirls in the sky, there's tons of them, especially up there between Finland and Russia. I don't know what they do up there, but there's a lot of that stuff. So if any of you have seen any of that, how about you, Mr. Research? You're looking up in the sky. You see anything like that? You look. You're an orb boy. Anyway, so we're like, well, I'm going. Am I the only one seeing? No, and we're all explaining. Telling each other what we saw, right? And it's there for a whole bunch of time, and it gets bigger and more defined, and we're starting to see other worlds on the other side of the dimension, and other things out there, and ships and people, and it's like, whoa, right? And then soon as the crowd has stopped blowing things up, it, like the last big that they had, they had a grand finale, and the last thing of that, the brightness of the swirl dropped by half. And then in a very short time, it unswirled itself and went pop. I mean, we all heard it popped itself, like pulling your belly button inside out. And bingo was like, what the frack was that? And that went on for at least a long time. I didn't have a watch. I don't have a watch. And anyway, so the whole crowd came up and said, "Oh, you guys, you missed it. You really missed it. It was so amazing." And we said, "Well, we could see it from here." "Oh no, not like, oh, the thunder of it all. It was amazing, And we didn't say anything about that, because of the 40 people who were part of this end times community, we were the only 5 who were sensitive enough to realize, A, it wasn't going to be the end of times, and B, that there were more interesting things out there. All you had to have was an open mind. And basically, this whole community was about not having an open mind, that you had to, it's like a cult, right? He hated using that word. Don't ever use the word cult, we're just a community preparing, So, and we were the only five that, we were part of that community because everybody in that community were not, and that was the thing I liked nice about it because everybody was. It was nice to be part of that. The thing that was most was the head guy, and he wasn't that. I mean, when it was just him and me talking, he was all right. As long as he didn't have to put on the show, he was all right, right? And he would. I used to read palms in Roanoke, and he would drive on a cycle and come to that place. I was I was there Friday and Saturday, and I was there between 4 o'clock p.m. and 8 because that's before the disco upstairs started pounding and the band that was on the main floor started playing. And the restaurant opened at 4 for dinner, and basically dinner was served from 4 to 8, and you could still at the lounge area still get food, but not the dinner from the dining room. The dining room closed, but you could still get food until they closed at 2, and that's why they could close at 2 in Virginia because they still kept serving food. And but by 8 o'clock, the crowd would come in, and the place would start to fill up, and it started to get loud. And when I'm giving someone a reading, personal reading, where I, basically read your palm, read your cards, read your runes, and then if you are up for it, I would put you in a guided meditation where I would show you your Akashic record. And what was truly amazing, gang, I would have more people who could go into state in a restaurant full of yakking it up and music going on than you guys. I mean, I don't know all of you because, half the people who watch, more than that, 3/4 of people, every time I say goodnight and then all of the statistics show, it's pretty amazing because it shows that there are 3 people in the chat right now. But when I look at the statistics on the black screen, it'll say that 40 people watched it. And that, right now it's 3 hours and 7 minutes and 30 seconds, but it'll be, 20 to 40 hours of watching because those 40 people have watched it for an average amount of an hour. Those are interesting statistics to my mind. So I don't know about those guys. They may go into state when I do guided meditations here on Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob. And you can get a hold of me, Sensei Al Bob, at thedudeawake42@gmail, right? And if you want to put anything in the old PayPal, no one has since ever. And I don't know if that's because PayPal says it works and everything's fine, and they're constantly sending me all kinds of things to do and invest in, and I ignore that. And maybe because I don't take part of all of their new economy, they don't want to put anybody's money in mine. Because a number of people say, I've tried, I really tried, and it just can't do it. So, and that may be why, this doesn't really go viral. But what's important about this channel is that it's up and that, lots of people go look at all those past shows. I keep telling you, go look at the old shows because they're all different. They're all important in their own way because they're all shamanic ceremonies, right? So, Siegel. Mm-hmm. You're the gulf that holds us together. Yep. It smells. Getting stick. Uh-huh. Let's see. My friend seen that I could not wouldn't show to again. It's not so much. I mean, those things are there. They're all around us, right? I had a minister at the beginning of the show, like 3 hours ago, when I started up holding this guy, and he was going on big time about the dimensional characters and the monsters and the, you know, the pit, you know, and all that is true, especially if you believe it. You know, hell isn't after you die. Hell is right here on this earth. So is heaven. You know, it's what is in your heart, and if your heart is dark, that's all you're going to see is darkness. You know, that's all you're going to feel. You're not going to trust anybody. You're not going to believe. You know, you're not going to have faith in anything or anyone, not even yourself. The only thing that is true is love's co-creation, and that is why we're still here. If we were as dark as most people say it is, we'd be toast. You know, back in the day when I used to get paid to look at all this stuff and make, statistical guesses. That's all they were. Um, you know, it looked like we were heading for the drain, and now they're really trying to scare the heck out of people, but it's not quite working. You know, so that Tom H guy, who I played, you know, a little bit, but how he was explaining how the Republicans, were planning to destroy America since Ronald Reagan. Well, that's a joke. This whole thing has been going on since the founding fathers, since what's his name, Christopher Columbus. He was the first Republican. At least in America, they had a bunch of them in Europe. They're called kings. And people who go, the serfs who went along with it, they had 900 years of the Dark Ages because they believed in that, and they settled for living in their own squalor. Getting 3 squares a day, being somewhat warm at night, getting a little trim every now and then, and all you have to do is read uh, The Wife of Bath's Tale. That is one of the best. Forget Shakespeare. That because it's real. Shakespeare is poetry in motion. He is he's sci-fi. That's Shakespeare, right? And he is talking about eloquent, deep thoughts that the folks at the Tower of Babel were talking about, right? And they hit the wrong fuse box and blew everything up. Pretty much time of Tower of Babel. Basically, what they were doing was building technology to rival the powers of God. And when I say God, I'm talking about the demigods. Because everyone knew that the prime mover wasn't some guy with a beard in a chair. No, that's guy in a beard in a chair is me, who's just a joker. I'm just a midnight smoker, a toker. I tell you stories. I'm your griot. That's not the prime mover. And pretty much every religious token has manifested itself in that way as a joker, toker, midnight smoker, right? Not the prime mover. We have not seen the prime mover because it's love's co-creation, unless that's in our heart. Unless we serve that, we're never gonna know the truth. I want to know the truth. Like in that Indiana Jones, the last movie, where the commie girl, breaks into Area 51 and steals the alien head. The the end, when all those hates come together as one, and the flying saucer is about to take off, and Indy's smart enough to take his buddies out of town, get the heck out of there. His girl and his buddy and his kid out there. But the other guy, the guy who was his co-spy, couldn't stop to take, he had to keep filling his pockets with the diamonds and the Dreckle to the point where he couldn't move. And then when the little axis got flown a bit too fast, he whoop, And the commie girl, she was like, I want to know. So when those crystal heads all came together and they looked in her eyes, now she had been there to serve love's co-creation. Not a problem. But when they looked in her eyes, she just was burnt to a cinder, And that's what power, greed, self-loathing, hate, fear, anger, anxiousness of social status will get you. When you are there to serve love's co-creation, not a problem. You're taken care of. Because none of this is real. Doesn't matter. I wake up I got a lot of, I died in a plate of spaghetti, diabetes, heart disease, you name it. They keep going about novel Nouveau 19, pretty much why the death rate is up. Is anybody, you had a hangnail, you died of novel 19. So anybody, heart disease, anybody that, well, they're putting on the death certificate, novel 19. And I would bet you if you were really, now I'm not saying this doesn't exist. I'm not saying that it isn't, because what it is that this thing, since it has been engineered and it has been, let loose, well, let the Kraken go, since we let the Kraken go, basically a number of things are going to happen. A, it's going to be with us until everyone gets, down with love's co-creation, right? There's going to be they let this go expecting it to do A, B, and C, but they have no idea about the unexpected consequences. And all through history, those are the things that really make the difference. So there's going to be some serious, and so who did this? It wasn't the Chinese. It was elements of the Chinese. It wasn't the Americans, elements of it. Right? It wasn't the English, elements. All of those elements go to make what is known as the high table. Right? And the folks who sit around that high table aren't really, the folks behind the curtain. Folks behind the curtain are what is known as the hidden hand. That hand is never seen. Right? So, but that hand has been relevant only to the, Plato said it's a wise man who's guided by the stars, but a fool who, follows them, right? So, pretty much, if you want to know what's going on, just look at the zodiac, right? So, for 26,000 years, we have been in the epoch of the Piscean age. And that's all about getting what you want, not what you need, not what you feel, not what you want to do well, but what you want. That need for greed. That was the Piscean motif. And you get it through violence. By scaring someone, threatening someone, treating them really poorly, right? 10-4. Hitting the hay, yeah, must be. What time is it in your land? It's like, what is it here? It's almost 11 here, so 5 hours. So, hey, Graham, you've done a pretty good job hanging in there, kid. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all being here. I'll put another one, and I'll keep doing this as long as I can. I mean, there are mitigating, but even when I had mitigating circumstances, I still was able to do it. Not as often as this. This has been a real blessing of my neighbor, that he has Wi-Fi, and I can still drive up the hill and sit in my car, but not as comfy as this, where it's heated and the bathroom and the water and the kitchen, So I too am going to 344. Yep. That's pretty good, Graham. And you've been a great input, and I do it for you guys, right? All three of you. But I know there's a whole bunch on the other side of the screen. So I'm going to let go, and we're going to read more of the Course in Miracles. But remember, I'm going to leave you with this. I have to put my glasses on here. I am as God created me. I want you all saying that 5, 10, 20, 100 times a day. Got that, Graham? You are as God created you, right? You don't have to change. The only change you have to do is a change in yourself that you want to see around you. You want to see the world better? Get better. Be better, right? Every morning I wake up because I have all these things wrong with me. Doctor said, "Oh, you should be dead." Oh, doctor said, "We need to rip you apart." Doctor said, "You're going to be in pain your whole life." Well, every morning I wake up, I am in pain because my autonomic system has unplugged and all the other little things going on inside of me kind of go there, right? And that's kind of why I coughed up. Whatever fur ball that's in me kind of made me cough up when I was seeing Mr. Wobble for the first time. And so I meditate every morning, right? Not on anything in particular, except I am as God made me, and I am here to serve God as love's co-creation, as the, blessed savage of the artist in the first person. That's what I am. That's what I'm doing here, and I'll do it till I'm called home. And this time, the 7th time's going to be a charm. I hope I'm not like a cat and have to do it 9 times, but the next time should be the charm. Lucky 7. Lucky 7. Lucky 7. I'm throwing crap. 7. 7, come on. They just disconnected the live chat. So I'm going to go. I'll see you tomorrow. Maybe in the morning, maybe at night. It's going to. I'm pretty much run by the weather. It's a beautiful day. I get out in the woods. If it's not, I stay indoors. I'm still writing my new novels. Still going good.